Yes, now that I've popped the chat out, it's no longer beside me. When is it starting? It's starting right now, Caden. It is starting right now, and you already can't see Nate, which means I'm not doing my job correctly. Off to a great start. There we go. Much, much better. What's up, guys? Caden, Caleb, what's up? AJ, how are you, man? No video today on the channel, but we do have a little kind of special mock draft that we're going to do, considering it's Friday. We've got camp opened up now. Nate from Apples and Geno's is joining me today. We're going to be doing a nice little mock. And Don will also be joining us as well, too. He won't be in the call, but he will be in the mock draft when we get started on that. What's up, Peter? Yeah, Nate, can you see everything okay? Chat, the guys are in here. Volume-wise, everything good? How are you doing, man?
Fun. I'm excited to get into it. I'm looking forward to some. I see like the mocks on Yahoo are already filling up with people trying to jump in. So that's a classic fantasy puck move.
This happens all the time for me. It's actually like ridiculous to try and find, because like people are always trying to like snipe the channel and stuff like that too. Like when we go live on this. And I don't think we've ever used, because I know some of the guys on your team use it's not Sleeper, but it's Fantrax. That's the other one. To kind of go ahead and do that. And I've never thought about using that at all. We always just use Yahoo. That's pretty much where our entire platform lives on a lot of the time. So yeah, outside of that. But the fantasy gods, the fantasy hockey Avengers, what the fuck is this? Yeah, guys, this'll be as tight as it can get. It'll be myself, Nate, and Don kind of going in mocks. I'm gonna be curious to see like where you guys want to pick from. Do you think that there's an ideal spot to pick from this year? Do you have a preference? Like, what's kind of like your go-to?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty comfortable anywhere in like the top 7 or 8. And then the back end is where it gets a little bit dicey to me. And there's a couple of reasons. There's like the teardrop after like Kaprizov, Pasternak, I feel like, which is usually most people's 7 and 8. And then you got to posit the Jack Hughes question. You got to look at other guys that really feels like you're pulling somebody up into the first round. And then I also think like once you get into the second round, like there's not a lot of difference between the guys at the top end of the second round versus the back end of the second round. And so it kind of feels like a double whammy where you don't get like the elite, like the McKinnon, McDavid, Kucherov, Makar, whatever up at the top. And then you also just get like the same guy as the team that already drafted one of those elite guys is going to get at the back end of the second. So if I can at least get in the top 8, I'm okay with it. But I'm really liking having a top 3 pick this year even more than usual, I think.
Yeah, normally I'm never actually that's not true. There was one year, I think it was the Creators League actually, where I was blessed with the second overall pick, and I ended up getting Mac, who was arguably like a better asset than McDavid was last year in terms of where we finished in the scoring in the league. But it definitely doesn't feel like, at least with this year, that there's a lot of flexibility on the back end. Normally at like that 10, 11, or 12 turn, you're getting 2 guys that are in kind of that like 90, 95 point range. But it feels like there's a lot more risk associated, or the people that are in that kind of like range on the back end don't really feel like they have quite as much as upside as some of the guys in the top 7 or 8.
Yeah, it really does feel that way at this point. So yeah, if I can, like the only league that I know already is the tier 1 of the APL, the Apples and Geno's patron league that we're doing, and I've got the 6th spot there, and that's not a bad spot to be in, right in the middle. You can kind of make sure you aren't getting run out on either side if like the D run happens or something like that. You can kind of just see how the room's reacting and react accordingly. So that's not a bad spot to be either. But yeah, I think definitely there's something to be said, especially this year, even more than normal. Like you're never going to complain with the top 3 pick or something like that. But this year especially, I think it feels extra good.
No, not at all. I'm going to just cut you out for a second here while I try to finagle my way into getting us a spot in one of these mock drafts. It's actually insane watching. I guess it's just more of like a popular time now in general.
That's true too.
in terms of like where the draft is going to happen. So I think it's just like it's hard to because everyone's trying to snipe this, but see if that works for you right there. Let me also find Don here because Don should be joining us as well.
I'm in.
Perfect. Oh, that's not him. Oh, we've got dude. All right, I may have to send you another link. This one's already in, and I'm still trying to search through. Dude, it's because Don doesn't actually have his name in Discord that hold on. Hold on here. Just shows how unorganized I am with this right now. You guys are making it hard for us. If only there was a way. There we go. There he is. All right, let's try another one. So don't leave that one. We'll try and get it up. Dude, this is actually crazy. You guys are making it hard. All right. Well, let's pull Nate back up so you guys can see him for it. That's not him. And we'll try and just go through some questions while I sort this out. Panarin being on a contract here in only 2 years from a 120-point season, it is okay to take him at the 18 spot over guys like Eichel, Jack Hughes, Marner, plus the Rangers have the 4th most off nights. What do you think, Nate? Where are you on with Panarin this year?
Yeah, I'm pretty into Panarin this year, relatively. Like in years past, he's been a lot higher. And I've been kind of out because he's never really been like a peripherals guy, but he's shot more in the last few years. So if you got a good weight for shots in your league, then that's a little bit better. And now he's going, yeah, more in that middle second to even late second in some spots. In that kind of range, and that's a lot more palatable to me. So like if I'm just looking at your settings here that obviously I've got for the Content Creators League, then yeah, he's solidly in that range for me. I'd have him even slightly ahead of like a Nylander or Marner in your settings. So yeah, I think that's a decent spot for him. Somewhere in the mid-second is where I'd definitely be thinking about Panarin. The off nights are a really nice plus, I will say. To have off nights on your top end guys is really nice because then you kind of know you've got that in the bank and you don't have to like try to shoehorn them in later with guys that you don't even know are going to be on your roster past the first week. I feel like, yeah, when you can just bank some off nights with your very first pick or your second pick in the case of Panarin, I think that's a good way to go.
Yeah, no, I think you're getting a lot of these. Mike alluded to it a lot this year with just conversations between our group and some of the content that he's put out there, where you're getting Rangers players at a discount this year for sure because of how bad their last season was. Did you happen to get into that link that I sent you there? Are you in on that?
Oh, the latest one?
Yeah.
I am in. Got
Okay.
the last spot.
Perfect. Love that. All right. So cool. So this one starts in about 5 minutes, guys. So we'll run through some questions still. It will be a 14 team. Where'd you end up picking? What spot did you get in?
I'm in the 6th spot.
You're in the 6th spot. Okay, perfect. I took the hard spot. I took 11. I think Don's in at the 2. Typical. He didn't want to take 1, so then he takes 2. Fellow Creators League banter right there. Yeah, no, normally when we try to do these things, like I don't know if you've ever really experienced a true FPPL mock draft before, but I'm excited to get your reaction. And I remember like jumping into your guys. I think you guys were streaming last night on your mock, and I saw Connor Hellebuck go round 7.
Yeah, that's an aberration, but it's not the most crazy thing that's ever happened.
And
Definitely the goalies go late.
yeah, I saw that and I was like, there is simply no way that this is real. Like, it was a categories draft too. Like, they were drafting from a categories perspective. I was like, in a Cats League, Kelly should realistically go in like the first 2-3 rounds. No, I know you guys hate goalies, but like, that's a little
Yeah,
insane.
I'm not taking him in the first few rounds. Honestly, I've never really had to have the hell of a question with myself because someone always takes him before I'm really starting to think about goaltenders, even the top end guys. So I honestly have not really entertained for myself a whole lot where I would actually take Hellebuck this year. I think there's Hellebuck is an interesting question this year for me because he's so locked in everybody's mind as the number one guy that he's and you're like paying this additional premium for him, and the likelihood that he outperforms the entire field again by a significant margin is pretty low. Like if you just look at any kind of goaltender performances over the last probably multiple decades at this point, like, it's pretty hard to outperform everybody year after year after year, and he hasn't outperformed everybody the way he did last year, in years before, right? Like, Vasilevsky's been there, there's been other years from guys like Saros in the past, Sorokin in the past, Shesterkin in the past. These guys have been there, like, right there with him. So if you are gonna pay that premium over any other goaltender, like, in some cases, like not just in our drafts, but in a lot of drafts, I'm seeing Hellebuck get picked like a round or two rounds before any other goaltender goes off the board. And at that point, like you really are betting on him not only being the best goaltender, but also kind of defeating the field by a fair margin. And that's just a hard bet for me to make on any goaltender that they're like that reliable, that they're going to be even better than everybody else by that margin. So yeah, for that reason and just the fact that I fade goalies, never really gotten into Hellebuck in any of my drafts.
Yeah, I think it's less, in my opinion, at least, it's less in the fact that it's like you're drafting him that he's going to seriously like outperform the margin of whatever goaltender. Like there's for me, there's like a really like a top four this year. Like you've got Helly, you've got Vasi, you've got Otter, and then Igor, in my opinion, and that's kind of like your solidified elite tier. And then there's like a big drop off from there, in my opinion. But I think
Mhm.
it's less, in my opinion, about the fact that he's going to outperform the field and more so the fact that he is just like so incredibly consistent and so incredibly safe that it's like, especially with how volatile, and we talk about it all the time, with how volatile goalies are, it's almost like it's like picking a car. It's like you're guaranteeing yourself like the best, technically the best goalie over the past 3 years, but also the safest. And when you have like, you look at it in like a tiers format, it's like you have your top tier of those top four, and then there's a massive drop off after that, and then you like compound the risk on top of that. And you saw what happened with Igor even last year, where that was a goalie up until last year where I would thought like he's also bulletproof, right? But all of that combined with the fact that the Jets were an elite team last year, and it's like it checks so many boxes for me. So that's why I feel like, it's arguable that he goes a tier or two before these guys because like he's just so incredibly safe, and it's less about like, and obviously it always depends on league settings when it comes to goalies, in my opinion, but it's just like he's been elite, and he hasn't shown that he's been anything but across the board.
Yeah. I think the problem with goalies too, though, is it is so dependent on the team. And yeah, Winnipeg was great last year. Everybody knows they won the President's Trophy. But last year, everyone was that sure about Shesterkin as the number one goaltender. He was the number one goaltender in ADP across every platform. And people were saying a lot of the same things. They were saying how safe he was, how great the team was in front of him. There's no way that Shesterkin was not going to be the answer. He was at least going to be top five, and he just wasn't, because the team just fell apart in front of him. That can happen with goaltenders, and it doesn't even really matter how well he's playing individually. It just matters that they're not the team in front of him is just starting to fall apart. And that's the part with goaltenders that really bugs me, is that it almost doesn't matter sometimes how well they're playing individually if the team takes a step backwards. And to some extent, I think Winnipeg will take a step backwards this year. You look at a lot of the on ice shooting percentage, stuff like that. PDO for that team was pretty crazy. So to some extent, they'll take a step backward. I think even like just by the law of averages, they'll take a step backward. How big that is obviously up for debate. But if they did have some sort of minor implosion, then all of a sudden he's right back in with all the other goaltenders in this top end. And are you really getting what you paid for? I just never associate the word safe with goaltenders, I guess.
That's fair. No, you're absolutely right, and I think it's just one of those things that, you know, it'll people will continue to think and operate this way until it's, you know, something that changes. Like to your point, like Igor last year is a great example, right? So people will continue to kind of like work and direct and draft accordingly. And then next thing you know, like the Jets kind of fall off a cliff, and then you're like, oh shit, I drafted Helly in the 3rd round when I could have taken like an elite defenseman if one's available, or so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're in. Everything looks good. No auto drafts. We love to see that. That means my link did actually, or people either sniped their way in here. I didn't even post into the premium Discord channel, and people were already like locked in here. So I wish Yahoo did a little, like, I wish honestly, if I had to play on one platform, it would be Sleeper, but unfortunately they don't do NHL. And it's just, Sleeper is just by far the best fantasy platform. I don't know if you do any fantasy football, but it's just like, it's light years ahead of everything else, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree. If Sleeper ever comes out with an NHL product, all of my leagues will go there immediately.
And it's funny because they have like a Twitter account that's associated. It's like NHL Sleeper, but then they don't have a platform for their for their hockey, and it just, I don't know, it pisses me off. Like, I think Fantrax is a close second, but not quite the same. You want to kill your sound, because that will give me anxiety, at least in the Yahoo like ping thing. Like that will.
Yeah, I did that.
Okay, perfect. It's probably coming from this as well. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I've got the draft board up. We kind of follow our way through. I think you're going to see your top 4 consensus here. It'll be McDavid, McKinnon, Kucherov, Draisaitl, in my opinion. I don't think there would be a circumstance where I would waver from that. I think, you know, you could interchange a couple of those pieces, but in my opinion, that's really like your top 4. But AJ is going to go Makar here. Any consideration on taking Makar over a Draisaitl?
Yeah, I've been taking Makar over Draisaitl fairly consistently.
Oh, wow.
Actually, talk about a player who's been up above and beyond all the other defensemen for multiple years in a row at this point. If you look at, just the value above replacement in a league like this, where you have 4 defensemen versus 6 forwards starting at any time, then I think you have to really consider it. Like, he's, as long as he's healthy, he's absolutely locked in. And I think he's closer to the Kucherov, McKinnon, McDavid tier than he is the rest of them, to be honest.
All right, so Randon got taken, and I think this is where the cutoff kind of happens for me at 11. Looking at all of the pieces in front, the Kaprizovs, the Matthews, the Draisaitl, Kucherov, I want the player that I think is going to best kind of compete with those guys on a per game basis. And so I've been taking Jack Hughes a lot of the time here simply because of the upside at the 11 spot. There's definitely safer options available, but in my opinion, I want to kind of try and make up for the fact that I don't get an elite tier 100 plus point player to try and combat that with obviously a more riskier pick in Jack Hughes, but one that I feel like does have the upside to kind of compete. And then typically what I'll do at the turn here, if I don't see Quinn Hughes, typically I'm good with taking Quinn Hughes in that spot. I know the defenseman will typically go really fast in these drafts just because it is FPPL, so I'm considering guys like Werenski, Bouchard here just to kind of start off with like an elite D1. But I really want to play it safe and pair my really risky pick in Quinn Hughes with a really safe pick and take William Nylander here. both dual eligible players. I think, in my opinion, that's a pretty good way to start if you're picking at the 11 spot. Especially, like I said, I don't think it feels good to necessarily take like a Werenski or a Bouchard at the turn there necessarily, because of the fact that if Quinn Hughes does go down, you really don't have a elite producing forward at that point, which I feel like you need in a lot of these circumstances. Yeah, I think if we look at the board here, like you went Matthews at the 6th spot over Kaprizov over Pasta. Is that kind of your preference as well?
Yeah, I think so. He's saying that he's healthy. You know, when he is healthy, he outperforms those guys still in most formats. The goal scoring upside is still huge. I did a pretty deep dive into his with or without you stats with Marner. Werenski and Bouchard go off right before me.
Welcome to a fantasy puck mock draft. This is exactly how it goes.
Yeah, that's fair. I definitely don't hate that. There's a couple guys I like here. I think Sam Reinhart is super safe. I don't know that he's gonna necessarily outperform some of the guys who might go after him here, but I think he's so safe. He's dual eligible. I'm looking for that kind of stuff in this range. Just keep my options open a little bit. So I really like Sam Reinhart anywhere in the second round. He's part of a huge tier, so I really do think you can go a lot of different directions here, and I won't really fault anybody for doing it. But I like Reinhart. I think he's just as locked in as anybody to get that 85 points, 40 goals, and he's sneaky good with the periffs too.
Yeah, do you have any, like, when you take Matthews because of the injury history or just kind of the immersion of Marner from like the roster, do you have any concerns about him being a more riskier pick, especially at the 6th spot? Like, are you looking to kind of go somebody a little bit more safer in the second round, or do you have a preference there at all?
No, it doesn't really change a whole lot. Like the biggest thing it changes is he's center only, so I'm trying not to draft another center only shortly thereafter, right? But usually I'm still taking the best player. I will figure it out. Like even last year in the Content Creators League, like I had Kaprizov, obviously went down to injury, and I didn't get over the hump, but I still, I finished right there at the end. I think I was like second in points for at the end of the year. Finished right there and still made a go of it in the playoffs. Didn't get there at the end like I did the first year, but it's like I think you can overcome some of that stuff. And really, when you talk about injury stuff, you're still flipping the dice. Like if you get to the playoffs and that's when they're injured, then that's a problem, obviously. But the likelihood of any player who does get injured, the likelihood of that specifically happening right at the end of the year in your fantasy playoffs is still not the most likely outcome either. So even if you are baking in the injury narrative a whole lot, which I typically am not, I think it's not something that I'm going to shy away from or try to find a safe pick. Generally, like I am trying to find safe picks, but I'm pretty worried that if I don't take Matthews at 6, that he's just going to absolutely bury me because there's been a lot of years where he literally like outperformed that year that he scored 69 goals in most formats. Like he outperformed McDavid and McKinnon that year just by virtue
Yeah.
of the ridiculous amount of goals he scored. So yeah, that's just a player that I don't want to get buried by. So when he falls to 6, I feel like I have to take him.
All right, so you've elected to not go D here. Let's take a look at Don's team because he's at the 2 spot. He goes Victor Hedman with his second pick into Philip Forsberg, which I think, the scarcity of D obviously starting off, like Don is pretty aware of it at this point. Anytime you do a mock or an FPL draft, D go very fast. So you've elected to punt a defenseman as well, or at least not take one in the 3rd round and go Matt Boldy, who I love this year. Like, I think he's in a really good spot. But you're like, it's weird because typically by this point, everyone is kind of in the 3rd round. Like if they go forward, they'll look to try and go defenseman. But I'm seeing that some people like yourself and Caden here, who's picking before you, who went Draisaitl, Panarin, Crosby, are just electing to not go D. Myself, on the other hand, looking at who is available here, I think there's a couple options that I like. I really like the upside of Tim Stützle in this range. He obviously doesn't really scale too well in the goal scoring department, and I don't think that I'm ready to necessarily take a defenseman yet. But I'm gonna do something interesting and take Jake Sanderson. And I think Sanderson, along with another person that I'm sure we'll talk about when he comes to fruition here, just knowing how quickly defense go, like I want to make sure that I have an elite defenseman shored up. Somebody that I think could hit over 60 points next year, just given the fact that he's got power play 1 locked up. The Sens should hopefully improve a little bit with Brady being healthy. And then now that I've got a defenseman, I typically don't try to necessarily stack people, but I think the upside with a guy like Tim Stützle, like I still believe he could be a 100-point player. He's dual eligible again, as well as the fact that he'll get you triple-digit hits. I think still has a ton of upside as well as a pretty decent floor. There were definitely some better players available that will get you some higher goal totals, but I think that extra kind of 20 point, I'll call it, ceiling that Timmy could have is worth taking over some of the other potential better goal scorers and shot volume guys in that range.
Yeah, I've never found myself drafting Stützle. A lot of it is the shot volume. A lot of it is the lack of goal scoring. He just doesn't scale well in a lot of formats. Your format, like I've definitely faded him because he doesn't do a lot of the specific things that you're looking for with your format. So that's one that I just can't get behind. Like it's 2 straight years now of him not performing at that high end level. And I just don't know if we're gonna get Kempe and Pedersen, both of the guys I was looking at. This is fun. There's still some fun guys. I don't really want any of these C only guys. That's the problem with these Yahoo drafts without any okay, I know what I can do. I'm gonna take Fox here. I do think Fox has a bounce back in him this year. Rangers off nights, we talked about that before. Get me in on this D run that's ongoing here in the 4th, more or less. But yeah, it's just a player with Stützle that I haven't been able to like get myself over the hump. It's always like, I don't know, there's always like 5 more players before I'm thinking about him and then he gets taken. I don't know if you like, do you think he's got that 90-point season back in him? I got a big problem with Travis Green being there and how he finally got this team to play defense, and I don't think they're going away from that anytime soon. And I think that's kind of holding down some of the offensive upside for a lot of players. So yeah, talk me into Tim Stützle. Why should I be higher on him?
I think that the number one thing for Timmy that like you're not wrong. Like when you look at a guy that's been just a point a game player over the past couple of years and hasn't really hit that 90-point threshold that we saw in the one season that he kind of popped off. I get it. Like I'm totally on board with it. It's definitely something, and I think that's partially why like you've seen him drop a little bit in terms of ADP. Whereas like you go and like even last year, like he was like a 2nd round guy, right? Because he was only a year removed from that 90-point season, and people are like, okay, it was just like kind of a down year. He's looking to bounce back, etc. I think the biggest thing for me is that I believe in the talent with him. Like typically when you see like a guy that's under the age of 23 hit a 90-point season, it probably means that he's going to replicate that some point in the future, just based off of the fact that like we've seen the skill at the level at that like age where he isn't really into his prime just yet. I would say like we typically like even with Boldy, like you see the guys that are like 23, 24 really start to like level up from what we've seen in the first 3-4 years. And I believe that's the case with Timmy. And there's a lot of things that I like on top of that. Like I said, like he has a really good floor. He'll get you triple digit hits, but he's really the guy in Ottawa. And if the talent's there, if the upside is there, if the opportunity's there, if the minutes are there, if the like, I think that is something that I'm willing to take more of a shot on versus, you know, a guy like Adrian Kempe, for example, who I know is kind of tapped at 75 points, right? Like he may get you like 75 points with 35 goals and a good shot hit volume similar to Timmy. Like I think that floor is probably better, but I believe that Timmy could be a 100-point player. just based off of the skill and the age and the opportunity that he's given on this team. And I try not to read too much into coaches and systems, because I think if you're going based off of that, like, I don't think you're picking Austin Matthews at 6. Like, if that's kind of like your philosophy, because like you look at a guy like Berube, who's typically like a defensive minded coach, and you saw the role that Matthews played last year, especially like even looking at it in the playoffs, where he was in the defensive end so often that it kind of adhered from his offensive upside a little bit, in my opinion. So I try not to invest too much thought into it. I'm not saying it's not a factor at all, but coming up on my pick here, I think round 5, 6 is a good spot to potentially take another defenseman, because I'm not, yeah, you know what? And I had this conversation earlier today, actually. I think I'm going to grab Matthew Tkachuk. I think this is a range where I feel comfortable because of the start I have, that I'm pretty covered at forward. And I'm not necessarily, like, I wouldn't say that I'm ahead because of how many people have like picked defenseman at this point in terms of my D spot, but I feel comfortable enough to take a risk at that point, given my first 4 selections and how kind of safe mixed in with some upside that they have, that I'm willing to kind of take that risk there. And then at this point, I'd probably go another defenseman because of how quickly D are going. Unfortunately, the guy that I really like is gone, but I do think in this spot, like, you're kind of trying to find still a power play 1 defenseman. But I unfortunately just auto drafted because my sound is off and took Mackenzie Blackwood, who normally I don't take a goalie that early, but I'm obviously would have rathered Igor or Philip Gustafsson. But I was looking at defenseman there, and I was probably going with a Dougie Hamilton.
You think Dougie hangs on to the top power play? I don't know if you saw, but there were some quotes from Jack Hughes about how he thinks Luke Hughes needs to get power play 1.
I actually don't. But in this spot, with the fact that Luke Hughes doesn't have a contract right now, we saw it, like, we see it so often where players start the season late. They don't get into camp. It takes them like a good solid like 20 games to get up to speed. And yes, like, Dougie's a bit of an injury risk, but I think that his per game numbers are so good, the shot volume so good, the goal scoring upside so good, that I wanted to kind of combat my Sanderson pick with somebody that's a little bit better on potentially on a per game basis, and somebody that has more of like a goal scoring power play 1. Like, I think eventually, because I'm bullish on Luke Hughes too, but I think just with the contract is kind of keeping me off him a little bit. I think people are kind of reaching a little bit too far on him in drafts, and I think Dougie's still, like, his shot volume is just insane, right? And if he does stay healthy, then it's kind of like a Werizki situation where, like, he then becomes like a top 7, top 8 defenseman based off his per game numbers.
Yeah, I have loved Hamilton for years, and now I'm like pretty scared because I think Luke Hughes really did break out last year. When Hamilton was out, he was on the top power play and he was crushing. And yeah, I think that it might just be like Luke Hughes blast off season if he can get the contract done here. I think they will. Like, I would say, like,
I would be surprised if they didn't.
Yeah, like 80% of these situations, the one that I'm worried about is Mason McTavish. Like, he's back in Ottawa. He's not. He's skating with the 67s. He's away from the team. Like, that seems way more risky to me than thinking that Luke Hughes is going to get something done here. But yeah, I like taking that swing. I'm feeling it this year with Luke Hughes. I think some of the underlying stuff suggests that he could be actually ready to just like establish himself as an elite defenseman in the league, like Quinn Hughes style. And I want to be in on that kind of upside. Yeah, I will say, like, everybody's kind of on it, and so like the value of that is really starting to go away in some of these sharper drafts. So yeah, you gotta find your spots on it, but it is definitely one of the more interesting conversations this year, I will say.
Yeah, you don't have to sell me on him. I'm right there with you. I think that I'm always a big believer in talent at the end of the day, and you just kind of sometimes will get opportunities forced into you because of how good you are. And I think Luke Hughes is definitely one of those players where it's like we've seen him every time that he's been in a power play one spot, he's produced close to like a 70+ point pace, right? So it's just a matter of time, and I think it's possible that Sheldon Keefe just like gives him the keys to the castle there, and then to your point, he's absolutely popping off. But the other thing that I don't like about Hughes is like there's risk associated to where like if he doesn't get power play one, his peripherals just aren't good enough, in my opinion, to take him kind of in the range that people are getting to him at. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Now that I have a goalie, I think my 2 picks literally just got snagged from me. So we're in a bit of a blender to start this, but we're going to make up for it. And I'm going to grab a guy. I'm actually going to reach on a guy pretty early here that I'm very high on this year that I think has a ton of upside. And that's Adam Fantilli. Big season that he just had, breaking out 30 goals in a time where he just wasn't even on power play one. I think this guy could literally explode this year. He's going to get line 1 minutes. I don't see a circumstance where they start to play Sean Monahan over him again based off what we saw last year. So I think he has a ton of upside, and he's going super, super late in drafts. So I'm very happy to snag him there. And then what do I want to do with my next pick? Because you guys are really flying with the defenseman here as well. And I try not to dig into that too much, but there are some D here that I still like. Do I want to go power play one here? Yeah, I think I would rather go Ghost over a guy like McAvoy, even though the peripherals are better. I find a lot of the time with McAvoy, he has a really good floor, but his power play numbers are just not very good. And if we're talking about specifically our format, power play points are worth 2. So I definitely try to focus on snagging power play one defenseman while we can. There were a couple other options that I was thinking of in that range. Like I looked at Jackson McComb, Luke Hughes was obviously still there that we had talked about. But I think that Carolina power play is going to be really good this year. And for my second defenseman, I'm okay with taking Ghost.
I like the Carolina power play. What do you think of Nikishin? I've been touting him as a sleeper just because, not that I think he unseats Gus Despair, but I think that if anything happened, like if the power play doesn't start the way they want to, like this is a guy who was scoring 60 points in the KHL Defenseman of the Year, all this kind of stuff at a really young age. And so I really like that part of his game. And I just wonder if Ghost is as secure on the top power play as we think he is. I think he's there to start the year, but do you think that there's any chance Nikishin unseats him by the end?
I think if you're planning for that, like you need to hope for an injury. I don't think there's a circumstance next year, just simply because of the way that I think Brendan Moore's going to deploy him. He feels very much like a earn your minutes type of coach, and those minutes are very limited and spread pretty thin across the board. And Carolina's defense is pretty deep as is. So for him to jump Ghost, who's a much safer option, in my opinion, to quarterback a power play, I think you would need to bet on an injury for Ghost at that point. But I do believe in the offensive upside, and I do believe that, you know, in categories leagues, he's going to be really good because of the kind of bangers profile that he has. But I'm just hesitant to see how much minutes he's going to play and what type of opportunity he's going to have, because he should be realistically power play 2. But it looks like, just based off some of the camp notes that I've been following, it's him and it's K'Andre Miller on power play 2. So that kind of confuses me a little bit, where it's like it's not just him quarterbacking that. It's 2 defensemen.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I think, yeah, in like true bangers cats formats, I think Nikishin could just be good enough to be your 4th defenseman on your team all year, and you can just kind of leave him there, accept all the peripherals that he's going to give you, and be happy with that. And then if he ever does get an opportunity, yeah, I agree. It's probably the most likely way that he gets there is through ghost injury. But if he ever does get there, then it would be blast off time. I think with that power play in Carolina, I think it's going to be a lot better this year. Last year was pretty bad, but I think like you look at how much Winnipeg's power play improved last year. What did they do? They put Ehlers on the top power play unit for the first time in years. I think if Carolina inserts the same player into the top unit, they could see some similar a similar boost in production. So pretty excited about that unit in general.
Yeah, let's see if there's any questions that really stand out to me. It's hard kind of reading chat and going through picks and everything, and
Yeah.
trying to draft well at the same time. It's a little bit sporadic right here, but we're moving. The draft board's good now, guys. I just updated it, so all good there. Let's actually take a look at the draft board before we do that. Get to answer some questions. As you can see, a lot of defensemen have gone, and you have two, which are Adam Fox and Jackson Lacombe. Are you comfortable at that point with your D? Are you thinking you need to grab another D in the next little bit here? Like, I know that they are pretty thin at this point, but there's still some good value at forward, I think.
Yeah, there's good value at forward. I like a few guys that are still here. Like I feel like Alex Tuck is getting a little disrespected, so that's going to be my pick here. I just think he's so solid. He did what he did last year, basically without power play one for 80% of the year. And I think, yeah, this year he could do a lot better. If we're thinking about your format here, the content creators FPPL, I think you said it is.
Yeah.
If we're thinking about that format, where blocks are worth a lot, then Alex Tuck is like the blocks guy for forwards.
Yeah.
Matthews does that too, actually, which is another reason to consider him in this format. Um, so I think he's super safe because of that. Plus, we saw like that one nuclear year he had with Thompson on the top line. I don't think that's going to happen again this year. It looks like first notes out of camp is Thompson is back on right wing, which is obviously where Tuck plays as well. So most likely they're not playing together, but I'm hoping for at least top power play with Alex Tuck and maybe a bit of a step forward for some of the other players.
All right, so what would I like to do here? I don't actually have a center outside of Fantillion. There's some good centers on the board here. Nico Hischier, Rupe Hintz, John Tavares. I think out of the three, I probably lean a little bit towards Nico, just given the upside. But I know that he did score at a pretty high clip last year. Tavares is interesting for me because I think he's dropping a lot in drafts, and typically you see really good value out of him because of the goal scoring upside in combination with the triple digit hits, or at least close to that 100 hit mark with him. And he gets a ton of power play points as well. Like, he was over 24. So like, given his ADP, like, it's a really good value. I do think, just given his age and the fact that, even though he is skating alongside Marner in the top six, like, he does see a bit of a downgrade in the power play with Marner leaving, and just the age factor as well. So I think here I want to take another defenseman, and out of everyone, I think I'm going to go with somebody. I think I'm going to go with a rookie here, and I think out of William and Parekh, I believe that Parekh probably has an offensive ceiling that's higher, but William is definitely the safer pick in terms of a guy that's just making the team out of camp, walking into a power play one spot. You've got, Boldy, Kaprizov. Like, there's just so many weapons already just between the three of them that I would feel probably more comfortable taking William over a guy like Parekh. But I do like Parekh and his offensive upside, and I think that he could be very... I'll say, honestly, like, I think Dougie Hamilton is a pretty good comparable for him. Somebody that gets a good amount of shots and has some actual, like, goal upside. But again, unsure of the peripherals with these guys, but I know that top unit, I'm probably taking Minnesota's power play over Calgary's.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I will take Parekh here. I love this player. I am uncertain about the role. I wish that Rasmus Anderson had gotten out of town in the summer. It's so weird. Like, even like Backlund, the captain of the team, is like, oh yeah, we know he's getting traded. It's just a matter of when. But like, it's such a weird thing to be hanging over your team. As soon as he's out, then that really opens the door for at least second pair minutes for Parekh. And I think they'd be crazy to not give it to him. Like, some near historic level goal scoring from the defense position at the OHL level for multiple years. I think he's really safe in terms of that. He really projects to me to be a top end goal scoring defenseman. And obviously, for a guy this young, you don't really know how he's going to react first year in the league, what his upside might be, what his downside might be. But I really want to be taking swings on players like that because I do think that the upside is pretty electric. And like all due respect to Mackenzie Weegar, I think he's a fine player. I think he can play on a top power play unit and do a respectable job. I don't think he's half as dynamic as Zane Parekh can be at the top of his powers. Maybe it's not this year. Maybe it's a year too early. That's definitely possible. But I do think that Zane Parekh has all the potential in the world.
Yeah, like I'm very high on him as well. I'm curious in terms of what Calgary is going to be beyond the omission of Rasmus Anderson. Like I was talking about Dustin Wolf being a high risk, high reward pick this year because if they do ship out Rasmus, which it seems like an inevitability at this point, whether it's within the first like 2 weeks of the season or whether it's like a trade deadline. It just that defense looks so thin without him there. Like you've got Kevin Ball on your top pair with Mackenzie Weegar. So I'm a little bit hesitant of Calgary and how quickly they're going to blow it up. So I just think that power play could be missing a couple weapons just in general. And when you're relying on a rookie defenseman, albeit a talented one, to kind of be the driver of your offense in his first season on the top power play unit. I'm not doubting his skills at all. It's just a little bit of an ask that I would feel more comfortable probably going in a different direction from a fantasy standpoint, at least.
I took my third center only. I didn't want to do it, but I think Kadri's super safe at this point, and I think there's just like a lot of guys in the same tier at this point, so
Yeah.
it's really hard to differentiate between some of the wingers. I've got a few later winger targets that I do really like, which I think I can still get. I'm obviously going to fill out my defense here as well, and then I might be forced to take some goaltenders at some point, but we'll see about that sometime later. Uh,
Sometime later.
We're only in the 11th. We got lots of time.
Only the 11th. Yeah, this is normally where Igor Shesterkin goes in your guys' drafts. I am going to take Yuri Slavkovsky here. I think he has a really good floor. I think he's solidified himself on that top line. I don't know if there's a ton more of a ceiling that he has, but in this point range with the blocks, with the hits, I really like just kind of as like a little bit of a floor pick. And then I'm going to go and take somebody a little bit more risky who scales really well in these formats that we're always a big fan of every single year. And this will be probably my third. And I don't think I actually want to go with centerman here, do I? Because I'm kind of tight on that spot. Are there any defensemen that I would actually like want to take? Let's go. You know what? I'm curious about your take here, but I'm going to go Sam Bennett. Are you okay with taking 3 forwards at this point, specifically centerman? Like I went Fantilli, Heischer, Bennett, and that's kind of my 3 center. And then I have Hughes dual eligible, Nylander dual eligible, Timmy dual eligible. Like what's your cutoff in terms of centerman?
Yeah, I think it really matters on your format, right? In Yahoo's base format without any like utility spots, it's pretty tough to run with 3, 4 center only guys. I mean, I've done the same thing just because the value feels too crazy to not do it, but it is tough. I really want to be focusing on those dual eligible guys, especially the left wing, right wing guys. If I can get a couple of those, I really start to feel like I'm opening up my roster flexibility a lot. So I'd like to be in those spots, but sometimes the draft, especially if you're in a pretty solid, pretty sharp draft, then that's just not there. And sometimes it really is just the like close your eyes and take the guy who's actually going to score a lot of points this year, and you'll figure out a way to make it work on your roster throughout the year. Again, another reason to take guys with off nights early on. If you can get one of those centers on a team that has a lot of off nights, then it starts to feel a lot better. You don't have to worry so much about what might be a little later on. I'm going to go ahead and take Cutter Goche before anybody snaps him from me.
He was pinned on my list. I was considering him as well. It's kind of still in that 30 goal spots. There is, again, a couple wingers that I do still have my eye on here that are kind of in that same range for me. But the shot volume, like his per 60 rate in combination with like the fact that he could be around to hit a game, is a great pick. I'm on him a lot this year. I like him, especially at his ADP. He's one of our key sleepers that we kind of are all kind of gravitating around. So I love that pick. I think there's a lot of upside with him.
I think he's this year's like Paterka. Everybody was on Paterka, and so it's like, is he really a sleeper? If everybody calls him a sleeper, like nobody's sleeping on this guy. So, yeah, I was super into Goche. I did a pod. I have to look up when it was. We did a pod in season last year where we are like, why is this guy stuck on like the third and fourth line under Greg Cronin? Like his per 60 stuff is just through the roof. He's scoring at will. Like it just was totally insane to me that for whatever reason, Greg Cronin was like, nah, I can't play this guy who's scoring like every other shift that he's on the ice. So hopefully this year we get some more rational coaching out of Joel Quenneville and we get a little bit more out of Cutter Gauthier. And yeah, early returns looks like he's going to play up the lineup a little bit more, which is good. I'm hoping that he can get some time with Carlson and or Terry because I think those guys could really help him pop off, but we'll see. Obviously, everybody thinks that the first set of lines that comes out in camp is like just how it's going to be for the whole year, and it never
Yeah.
works out that way, and we
No.
all get surprised like after 1 week. But yeah, early returns. I think he's going to be good no matter who he plays with. But I'd like to see him play with those guys for sure.
Any like just not trying to read into it too much, but anything that you've seen camp wise that you've been really shocked about, that's really stood out to you, just based off of like what you've seen over the past couple of days? Do you tend like, I tend not to read into it too much, but sometimes where I'm reading like coaches quotes and I'm like, really, like this is what's happening.
Yeah,
anything that's really just stood out?
One thing that was pretty cool was they said that Will Smith is going to play on the wing this year for the most part. And over the summer, there had been a quote from one of the beat writers that they were going to try him at center and try him at 2C. And I don't know if that was like maybe the thought before they got Misa in the draft. And so now they're kind of rethinking that and they'll be like, actually, no, we'll play Will Smith as a winger and let him pop off alongside Celebrini. So I think that's actually really bullish for Will Smith if he can just be Celebrini's winger all year long. I think Will Smith has a lot of talent. I don't know if we'll get exactly what we got out of him in that kind of insane stretch that he had towards the end of the year last year, but I think it's so bullish for a rookie player who's like getting the load management treatment, wasn't playing every game early on, and it felt like it was going to be one of these rookie seasons where he just couldn't quite cut it his first year in the league. But then he turned it around, and full credit to the player, but full credit to the coaching staff too. I feel like a lot of coaches would have just been like down on that guy and they would have been like, you need to show me something to let me put you high up the lineup. And San Jose, they're like, no, like we're here for you. We want this to work in the long term. Put him in a spot to succeed, and he kind of figured it out for himself over the course of the year. I just think that's such a bullish sign for a player. So I'm pretty excited about Will Smith, and hopefully he can stick with Celebrini at even strength and on the power play for the vast majority of the year. I think that could be really exciting.
Yeah, I've been a fan of him since his like draft year. Like seeing him at the World Juniors, like the talent is undeniable. I'd argue he's just as skilled as guys like Mitchkov, like Celebrini. Like the talent is obviously there, and the fact that he was producing a close to a point a game rate to finish off the year just indicates that he can hang even in year one. And seeing him potentially be able to skate alongside Macklin for the entire duration of the year, like that's a no-brainer to me. Like you want these guys to essentially become the league's new Matthews and Marner, for lack of a better comparable, or McDavid, Draisaitl, whichever comparison you want to go. And I think there's just so much upside with him too in year two. Like I'm never really I never read into too much in terms of like the sophomore slump, even though it does seem to be a consistent thing for whatever reason. But I just believe in the upside and the talent with this guy, and for him to be able to skate alongside Macklin for this year gives me a lot of hope that he'll be successful in another breakout.
Yeah, I see Landeskog going too. This is definitely the range for guys like sleeper guys. Coronado, I saw was playing on the top line in first looking camp with Huberdeau and Kadri. That'd be a good spot for him. Last year, he was stapled to Coleman and Backlund, and with all due respect to those two guys, they're not exactly offensive powerhouses. But if he can hang on to power play one this year, plus play with Kadri and Huberdeau more often, I'd be a lot more excited about the upside for Coronado to take another step. They gave him a big contract this offseason, or both player and team are committed to each other for a long time now. I think it'd be nice to see him take a step. And then Landeskog right there. There's a quote from Landeskog is like, I didn't grind my ass to for 3 years to get back here and like sit on the bench. Like he wants it
Yeah.
all. He wants to
Yeah.
play his full minutes. He wants to do the thing. And I just love that attitude. Didn't expect anything less from a beauty like him, but I just love to see a quote like that come out.
Yeah. Yeah, we're getting to the end here. We're seeing a lot of the sleeper picks like Will Smith, Coronado, Marco Casper, guys that everybody's kind of aware of. I don't hate McTavish as like a last pick in some of your drafts now, just given the fact that hopefully he signs a contract. That upside, he was again a second half breakout candidate that seems to always happen with the Ducks, but then never actually translate to the following season. But hopefully this year is the exception, because I do anticipate, just with some of the additions that they've made, that they will kind of take a step as a team in general. Anybody like sleeper wise, just in this range that you're looking to always get to, or is it just kind of like pick up the litter, whatever's there, you're just kind of, you have like a couple options? Like, is there anybody that really stands out as like I want to make sure I get to this guy in my last couple picks?
I think Ryan Donato is a guy that I'm actually pretty interested in. I know everybody just threw up in their mouth a little bit when I said that, but you look at what he did over the course of last year, and yeah, everybody's going to see like the super unsustainable run he went on at the end of the year where he shot like twice as high percentage wise as he ever had before in his career. That much is true, but also like he's gonna play like probably 18, 19 minutes a night with Connor Bedard all year this year. That was like what worked at the end of last year. They looked at him this offseason. They're like, yeah, we want to give you a 4-year deal. They give him the 4-year deal, and right away in camp, he's playing with Bedard and Burakovsky, I think was the line that they put together. So, yeah, it might not stick all year, but at least the first inclination is for them to go right back to that pair that was actually quite good together at the end of last year. And I just think it's a guy is like center, left wing, right wing eligibility. He's got the off nights. I think he like ceiling case can score 30 goals, 60 points. The underlying stats have actually always been quite good with Donato. He's just always played really far down the lineup, and I just figured he was one of these guys. There are a lot of guys who have like pretty decent underlying stats, but never get the opportunity. And I always just figure like coaches hate this guy for whatever reason, doesn't hustle on the back check, whatever it is. He's just never going to come out of the bottom six, but he's always going to be there because he's actually pretty decent. So I just think I just thought he was one of those guys. And then look at this, he finally gets the opportunity and he just pops off. I think that he could be a guy who really does that this year. I love Troy Terry late here. Leo Carlson is a guy who I think could take a step in a year like this. Yeah, you got Landeskog going in the 15th round. Michelli's getting the first look with Matthews and Nyes on the top line. That's obviously interesting. I like the D'Angelo pick in the 16th here. I think he's going to get power play one most likely to start the year at least. I don't know if Schaefer's going to stick around for the full year, or if he only played, what was it, 17 games in the OHL last year, and now he's going to go straight to the league. I don't know if that's the best solution on a team like the Islanders, where it doesn't look like they're in contention right away. So I think there's a lot of guys that I really like in these late rounds, and I've been taking a bunch of different guys. So I think there's not any specific guy, but there's a lot of guys that I think have some pretty solid ceiling scenarios.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, we got through this one. Let's take a quick second. I want to go over Don's team here, and then we'll kind of quickly talk about yours and mine. Don's at the 2 spot, goes McKinnon into Hedman, Forsberg, Wyatt. Anything stand out in the first 4 rounds outside of obviously Victor Hedman going at the end of the second there? Yeah, I'm not sure how often you're going to see that in most drafts, but in this one specifically, where you have Quinn Hughes, Dahlin, Werenski, Bouchard, and Makar go off the board early, are you typically going D here to try and get a power play 1D? Are you waiting a little bit? Like, you obviously didn't go until round 4 to take a defenseman, but thoughts on Victor Hedman here, kind of starting off and making sure that you're solidified at the D1 spot there?
Yeah, I think in this specific format where there are 640 versus the 6 forward starting spots. Like I mentioned, I think you can justify it in most formats where you are getting a little bit more leniency with the utility spot and you can move some forwards around, do some more things. Then I probably wouldn't be drafting Hedman this high. I think Bouchard, like, I think that is the tier. Like, you have the top 5D that should probably all go, into the middle, maybe creeping towards the back end of the second, depending on your format. And then after that, I do think there is a tier break between those guys. And then for me, it's like the Hedman, Yossi, Morrissey, Fox kind of tier. Depending on your format, again, you could throw a guy like Sider in there if you got big weights for hits and blocks, stuff like that. So I think he is a little early, but I can see it specifically in this format where, yeah, you do want to have some defensemen. Um, that's kind of where I'm at. But I mean, getting Philip Forsberg at the 3-2, like it was between Reinhardt or Forsberg for me at 2-7. So I love Forsberg at 3-2.
Yeah, it kind of feels like it should have just flipped the other way around, and Don just went a little safer with the defenseman that he wanted out of his tiers there. But then happy with Forsberg. I think Wyatt's in a really good spot this year, just based off of the fact that he seems like he's skating alongside Rantanen at 5-on-5, which, bumps his value a little bit in my opinion. And then getting Jake Otter in round 5. I know you're rolling over in your grave right now the fact that there's a defense or a goaltender going within the first 7 rounds of this draft. But I like Otter, especially in round 5. Like, I think that's really good value. Love Timo Meier this year. I think a lot of people are sleeping on him, and you can basically draft him kind of at his floor value. And then it gets into Montour and McAvoy as defensemen kind of start to thin out. I don't know if I would necessarily go. I think I said Montour. If not, it's Montour and McAvoy. Where do you like Montour's always felt like somebody that I just haven't been able to get to, simply because of the fact that I'm not prioritizing him as a power play 1 defenseman because the way that Seattle kind of splits their power plays.
I think that will be interesting this year. New coach again. So do they split the power play or do they actually finally load up a top unit? I think both options are possible. They do just have it really does feel like they have all the same guys spread out throughout their lineup. So it kind of does make more sense personnel wise to do the 1A, 1B thing. And so that might still happen. So yeah, I've been calling it like the mushy middle of defense this year that I'm trying to stay away from a little bit. There are a couple exceptions, like Harley I really like this year. I think Chikrin has a lot of upside if he can hang on to power play 1 all year. I like Jackson Lacombe a lot, especially if you got a big blocks weight. He's going to do that. And then if he does play on power play 1 all year for Anaheim and the power play takes a step, which I mean, it was pretty much the worst unit in the league last year. So you would hope it would take a step. Then I think he could have a bit of a pop off year. So, but a lot of these guys like the Montours, the McAvoys, like even Dougie Hamilton to some extent, sorry to say, I just don't like that range of defensemen. It feels like they're getting pulled up maybe a little bit.
Yeah, especially here where there's just so many going early. Like, it feels like you kind of have to grab a couple, but we'll try and just skim through the rest of it, not to cut you off there, but Stamkos, Raquel, Byfield, all pretty solid picks in that 9 to 11 range. Rasmus Anderson, again, if you count blocks, that's a good pick. Morgan Geekie is kind of sneaky in these later rounds. And then Coronado, Ryan Leonard, and then Don actually gets Makar in round 16 there, so that's incredible value out of Don. Good work from Don there. That's crazy. Let's look at your team. So 3 forwards off the bat. We talked about Matthews, Reinhardt. You were talking about being a bit of a safer pick into a Matt Boldy, who is somebody that could score 40 and has some upside to him as well this year. I like your start. Adam Fox is your D1. We're actually not too crazy about Fox just because of some of the lack of shot volume on his end in the formats, but he is a power play 1 defenseman. He's basically got a 60-point floor to him. He just doesn't really project too well in terms of trying to grab an elite defenseman. At least someone that, like, he does, his block totals aren't bad by any means. Like, he's in that triple digit mark. But as your D1, like, I don't know if I would necessarily, like, were you considering Sider there? Were you considering Harley at that spot?
I think Harley is not assured the power play 1.
Really? I don't know if, like, I might just be all in on him this year, but I think he's pretty much guaranteed his power play 1 spot at this point. You saw it in the playoffs last year with the most important part of your season, and you're sliding Harley on that top power play unit over a healthy Miro Heiskanen. So I think that's my take going into next year. But you're still hesitant, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's at least a possibility that Heiskanen takes some work away there. I don't know what exactly the split in my mind is yet. Like maybe it's like 70-30 Harley or something, but there's still that 30% that is holding me back. The thing I really like about Harley is that I think of all the defensemen kind of going in that range, he's the guy that I could see having like the Zach Werenski type season. Probably not with the shot volume necessarily, but like the all of a sudden this guy's scoring a point per game. We're like, oh, this was the guy you had to have in the fifth round because he scored at like basically a early second round level. So that's the part that I really like about Harley is I think upside is kind of unmatched with all of this. And so that is a reason I feel a little bit more comfortable taking him. But yeah, that is one reason I would go Fox. Sider is really dependent on that power play, in my opinion. He's not a great even strength producer, and that power play ran really, really hot last year. I think that it'll be good again. I don't know if it'll be great again, and that will take some of the steam away from Sider. Again, probably depends a little bit on your format, how much you're valuing those hits specifically that he provides over a guy like Fox, but definitely a big time peripheral guy.
Yeah, and then we go Celebrini Genther. I love both these picks. I think Celebrini's like he could easily be a point per game player. Like I think a lot of people view him as kind of like that new up and coming generation over a guy like Connor Bedard. Are you considering like if Bedard's there, which one are you taking and why?
Yeah, I've got Celebrini projected significantly higher, so I will be taking Celebrini. I mean, Bedard this year gets the right wing eligibility, which is kind of nice. But if you're just going by base projections, you look at like what the sports books have these guys for. It's Celebrini pretty clearly in a lot of systems, a lot of projections that I've seen all have Celebrini there. What he did last year was pretty incredible on the team that was there. Like, um, they shipped away a lot of guys last year and left them to play with, Will Smith and Tyler Toffoli, which are a couple of guys, but like the defense was non-existent, and still this guy's trucking along in his rookie year, just carrying the whole team on his back. And that's something we haven't quite seen out of Connor Bedard yet, right? So I
Yeah.
think for those reasons, I'm there on Celebrini.
Yeah, it definitely feels like Bedard's in a tough spot. Like he's kind of still being priced according to his upside in that same range as like a Caulfield, as a Celebrini, as Kempe, even Patterson in that range, like based off of where his ADP is at. And I think just the biggest kind of dynamic that I'm seeing is that Macklin actually has people that he can play with. Like we talked about Will Smith. He's got William Eklund on that line as well. The shot volume also, like his shots per 60 was actually a lot higher than I realized what it was after doing a little bit of a deep dive on him. So I'm happy to take Macklin over Bedard this year, just if you're talking about a redraft. In a keeper league, it gets a little bit more complicated, but I digress. Love Gunther this year all over him, Fiala, and then you finally start to shore up your defense later on and grabbing Jackson Lacombe and then Zane Parekh in the 10 spot. And then you finish off as your D4 with Jake Wallman, who I've actually like had a lot of conversations with people around. Everyone's kind of talking about the fact that, like what happens when Bouchard goes down and he could take over that one spot in Edmonton. And obviously at that point he goes nuclear. And I'm trying to like pump the brakes on him a little bit. Like I don't actually think that the peripherals were good, and I saw that you took him in the Creators League last year, and I think that was one thing because he was the power play 1D in San Jose. But Bouchard is also notoriously healthy, so I'm not really like buying into that narrative too much. But as a player on like a per game basis, I could understand as like a D4 given the range of people that were available. But curious as to why you went him over a guy like a Sam Renzel or a Tony D'Angelo or somebody that you know is going to be a power play 1D in that spot.
Yeah, I think part of it is I took Parekh before, so I was looking for a guy that I think will stick in my lineup all year, even if Parekh kind of flames out and I have to go get somebody to replace Parekh. I still think Wallman can fit into my lineup because of those peripherals. Like the blocks are insane, especially if you're talking about your points format here, where the blocks are pretty heavily weighted. Blocks are going to be there for Wallman. Like Ekholm has scored 40 points a year for the Edmonton Oilers. I think Wallman kind of has something similar to that in the bag without power play one. I'm I'm not thinking that he's gonna get power play one. I'm not like banking on a Bouchard injury, but it is nice to kind of have that in your back pocket that, if Bouchard did go down, probably it is Wallman that goes on power play one. And you have to imagine he'd be a smash if he was on there, and he'd like given the shot volume and the blocks that he does put up, if he was on power play one in Edmonton, like if you were told today that Wallman was going to be the power play one quarterback for Edmonton all year, like where would you take him, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he the thing that scares me about him is he doesn't really consistently play like a lot of games. Like I think there is an injury risk associated to him as well. If you look at his injury history over the last little bit, like he always hovers around like that 65 game range, which is a little concerning for me. But you're right. Like if you're saying like, oh, he's the power play 1D next year, like he's probably going like 5 rounds before that. Like people are reaching on this guy at that point, right? Like, so I don't hate it. Like I'm not saying it's impossible for Bouchard to get injured, and I don't think that you can really predict injuries on a yearly basis. But there's just some people that I find are more injury prone than others. Okay, are you interested in doing another one? Do you want to kind of wrap up here? What's your schedule like? We can get into another one if you want. We can do a 14. I don't think I've ever done a 10. Do you ever do any 10-man mock drafts? I don't ever do 10-man mock drafts.
I've never done a 10. I gotta be honest. I'm down for whatever. Let's
cool.
do it.
All right, let's get into another one. I'm gonna pick from a much better spot this time and say like, fuck you to you and Don for snagging these picks. But see if you can get into that one before it gets snagged up. I'll send Don the link too if he's still interested in doing one. Get him in there. Yeah, I'm not really wasn't really too thrilled with my draft there, but felt like I was a little bit distracted. Felt like I'm being too much of a host right now.
Yeah.
Is what it is. Oh, you're going at the 12 spot. Okay, this will be fun.
Yeah.
Now we'll actually be able to compare and contrast a little bit. But I just wanted to highlight some questions here. Mark Dupuis specifically, if you're still here, thank you for the $14 donation, man. Really appreciate the support on the channel and having guys like you. Like guys, you don't feel free to donate or by any means. Like we don't expect donations or anything like that, but really appreciate it, Mark, if you're still around. Yeah, McCarr's a really, really safe pick. I don't hate that take on potentially taking him at 4. Typically at 4, I'm always looking for trying to get a player with a Draisaitl that could score 50 goals, right? Like even though McCarr is by far the best defenseman in my opinion, I still want a guy that could win the Rocket Richard. And I think any of your first 4 picks outside of Kucherov, I think from the goal scoring upside, but he just does so much outside of that. I don't think I'm really swaying away from my top 4 in that sense. But yeah, guys, if you have any questions, we'll try, and we've got some time here now. We've got 7 minutes that we can kind of rattle off. Let me just find a couple here. Do you think Mitchkov will be a point per game player in Philly? I want to say yes really badly, but I think he's going to live in like the 75 to 70 point range, just being a little bit conservative. But I'm a big believer in the talent. I'm a big believer in the upside. He produced at a point per game rate in the second half of the season last year. His shot volume was really good, actually, on top of that, in that last little kind of like second half. And I think like with Torts being gone, they're just going to open it up. And I think they're going to be a more offensive oriented team just with some of the talent they have in that roster still. I'm not expecting them to be like a playoff team, but I do think Mitchkov does play a big part and sees a bump in minutes at 5-on-5 specifically. And he's just going to absolutely devour the league on the power play. Like I'm pretty high on him this year. I haven't actually been getting to him as much as I'd like in drafts, just given the upside, but I think he could easily score 30 goals next year as well as have a pretty decent shot volume and around like that 75 point range.
I love Mitchkov. I projected him for 76 this year, 23 power play points. So I think there's even some meat on the bone there. And that was under 18 minutes average time on ice that I projected him for. I don't know if like Rick Tocchet is the guy who like unleashes the flashy guy.
He's not a Marty St. Louis where he's like just fuck the defense, everybody. Let's just like send the guys in the top 6. But I think it's better than Torts though.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, Torts is like ultimate worst case scenario for any young player with any sort of defensive deficiencies.
In a dynasty face-off wins Cats League, oh god, would you consider moving Wyatt Johnson for Logan Cooley? Wyatt having that right wing eligibility seems pretty valuable to me. I think the upside is pretty similar just in general with the two players, but I think that Cooley like if you want to count the face-off numbers, Cooley's probably the better option. But the fact that Wyatt does get right-wing eligibility puts him over the edge for me. Anytime you can get a legit centerman that has dual eligibility, like a JT Miller, like I'm trying to think off the top of my head right now, Elias Pettersson, guys that are actually like playing center full time in the National Hockey League, but have dual eligibility for some reason because they played left wing for 3 games. It's worth taking the double eligibility player and having a guy on right wing that'll get you 300 faceoffs in combination with more or less the same point production out of the both of them.
Yeah, I love both players, so it's hard to move either direction. But with face-off in Cats, like, yeah, having multiple guys, if you can just get a couple of guys who have that winger eligibility who are taking draws on the regular, that's how you win that category.
Who would be your sleepers or high upside guys in the later round? Leo, we kind of talked about that a little bit. We both are on Cutter Gauthier this year. I think Owen Tippett's also a good option. He's kind of going a little bit under the radar. I'm still scared that I'm not seeing him in top 6 lineups in camp right now, because I am a big advocate of Tippett given the hit and shot combo. I've just been praying on a yearly basis for that guy to play over 15 minutes a night. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. But, Rick Tocchet, super offensive coach, is going to give that guy 18 minutes alongside, he's going to play alongside Mitchkov and Zegras, and they're going to be a minus 40, but they're going to have like 80 goals for, so it's not going to matter. That math doesn't actually work, by the way, so don't quote me on that.
Nobody's doing any math here.
Yeah, don't ever do math in public. Is Yossi too dangerous to draft this year? I'm finding it hard to get to him. Are you getting to him at all, Nate?
Yeah, I do find it hard to get to him as well. It's just there's so many unknowns. Like, what if he decides like 15 games into the season, he's like, actually, I can't do this.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
he just hangs him up. Like it's some percentage of a possibility, I think. And there's another percentage of possibility where he's like a top 5 defenseman on the year, and you got him in like the 4th round or whatever. He's going in these Yahoo drafts. So that is nice, that kind of upside. But most of the time, that early in the draft, I'm just so concerned about the floor for my team. I just don't want to get that big of a miss that early on. And so I think most times I've been opting to go with other guys.
Guys, we have 104 people in the stream right now with only 16 likes. Let's hit that like button if you guys can. We got up to 100 likes in our last mock draft stream, which I kind of pressed people on. I baited them in being like, I'll do a 3rd mock draft in a row if everybody got 200 likes, or it was 85 or something, and we ended up finishing with 100 likes. So hit that like button if you guys are enjoying the content. Big shout out to Nate for taking some time out of his day to be here. It is a Friday. So normally, like, clearly none of us have social lives at this point. My social life is staring at Yahoo ADP on a regular basis, trying to rank players and cross-referencing with our projections. So I'm really good friends with all these players in Yahoo rankings, but could you guys speak a little bit more about Parayko in St. Louis? Does he have a shot at getting some power play one time? Boomtown, we're actually pretty high on Cam Fowler this year. He's in our must draft defenseman video. I think he's the clear-cut power play 1D after what we saw from him last season. He's got a good kind of mix of peripherals on top of that, but I think he just showed that he is clearly the power play 1 guy there, and I don't really anticipate Parayko jumping into that.
Yeah, Falco's getting power play 2 as well. So Parayko is like not on a unit basically the entire time Montgomery was there. So I don't think he'll get there this year unless there's injury, obviously.
If we hit 100 likes, Nate's got to draft a goalie in the 3rd round. I think if we hit 100 in the likes, Nate has to draft a goalie in the 1st round, especially because he's picking at the 12 spot. I think like if we hit 100 likes, like that's like you'll never like we'll have to clip this and then save it in like the archives, and like he'll have to add it somehow into the brand new intro that they just got made. If you haven't checked out any of Apple's and Gino's content, definitely go check them out. Yeah, that's something that might just live in the history books if that were to ever happen.
Oh dear, I don't know if I'd ever recover.
We're at 28, so I don't think you've got too much to worry about. But thank you guys for being here. Appreciate it. I love doing mocks with you guys, and our Unfortunately, I haven't really been able to post these links in Discord. Typically, like it's not as like you're pulling out all of the guys that want to get into drafts with you here, Nate. It's we're taking over Yahoo's draft portion. If only there was a way that we could do a private one, and I don't think I will ever be purchasing Yahoo of Fantasy Plus, so I don't
Yeah.
think that'll ever be an option. But it is what it is at this point. So normally I try to I'm very thoughtful in our in thanking our community for allowing space for other people that weren't in prior drafts to be able to sub in, but it doesn't look like that's the case. I'm seeing some duplicates in here, but it is what it is. It's a good opportunity to kind of pick from a different spot. I don't see Don in here, so it'll just be the two of us. But at the 12 spot, I'm curious to see, is there a strategy that you have in these later draft locations? Like, I think the 10 sometimes is nice because you can get a guy like Rantanen who feels a little bit safer than those 11 and 12 spots, or like a Brady Tkachuk, for example. But 11 and 12 just feels like the worst two spots that you could draft from this year.
It's not a great spot for sure, but that's what we're here for, right? We're here to see how it feels and to try to figure out what we're going to do if we do get those spots that do feel tough this year. So, yeah, there's some options. You can go the defense route. You can make that bet on Quinn Hughes. You can make that bet on Zach Werenski if you want to bet on him doing what he did last year. He's probably worth this pick if he can do it all again. You can go, yeah, if Jack Hughes falls, then I'm probably interested in that. Jack Eichel, I think, is in line for another, like last year he paced for 100 points. I think he's in line for another 95 to 100 point season. So I think there are some options that don't feel terrible, but there is the chance, especially at the 12, I think, where everybody that you actually were kind of interested is off the board and you are like fully into that next tier where you're like, man, I'm getting two of these guys who feel like the exact same as the guy who's going to go at the 212 here.
Yeah, it's definitely not fun and not something that I'm really too interested in drafting, and if I do land in that spot, and it definitely makes things a lot harder, in my opinion, to go and kind of be in that range. But I did like the way that I started the last draft, where I went Jack Hughes into William Nylander. Like that probably feels like my ideal situation in terms of what that looks like. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with this one. It's very possible some weird things do occur, as they always do. Like I don't think I've seen Makar go at 4 over Draisaitl before, and then I have you telling me that apparently it's a common thing. So
I don't know if it's common, but it is something I'd be doing.
All right, I'll have the actual draft board up this as well. So hopefully you guys won't have to complain about the draft board not moving. That should be good. Cool. Let's get into it. Should see a pretty good consensus top 4 again. I think because I'm picking in the 5 spot, my life is easy. I take Cale Makar here probably like 95% of the time, unless one of those top 4 guys do fall to me. I don't think there's really an argument to drafting a guy like Kaprizov or Pasternak over Makar. If I'm really want to go forward here, I would take Matthews, and I think at that point it kind of depends on your scoring format, but that's kind of where I'm at least when it comes to the 5 spot.
Got another Nate in the room.
Uh-oh.
Looks like Malkin, though. I don't know.
How big of a season can JT Miller have? 90 points, question mark?
Yeah, I think like, I don't know what you think, but I think he could have a really good year this year. He obviously had that huge year, the first year of Tocchet there in Vancouver. I don't think that was necessarily real. There were some pretty unsustainable percentages driving that one, but also like he's got arguably better players to play with, at least on the power play with Panarin and stuff that you got here in New York. So I think he could have a pretty huge year. I think that point per game should be kind of the baseline expectation, with room for up to 90 points, I think is probably close to the ceiling, but it's definitely within the range of outcomes for me.
Yeah, I think his ceiling if you're talking about really like the high end, like I wouldn't be surprised if I saw him in the 85 to 90 point range. I think he's going to live more in that 70, 75 point range. I think you saw with the 35 points in 32 games in New York last year, he shot 23%. And it's a small sample size, but it's still, enough to where at least looking at his point totals historically, he started to just come down a little bit. And I don't know if that was just what happened in Vancouver last year, or if it's more so like I'm reading into the fact that he's going to be 32 on a team that is also not really young, in my opinion, and they are kind of more outside of Panarin, I would say, because I think like he's kind of in that age list here. But you look at guys like Zib, who have been steadily declining over the last 3 years. You look at like Alexis Lafreniere not being able to really produce at the rates that people thought he would. He's kind of just sit in that like 45 to 50 point range. Will Cooley's now going to be in your top 6, who I don't really consider a talented player in that regard. And then Trocheck is normally in that 60 point range. So it's really Panarin and Miller that I'm getting excited for in that Rangers top 6. And if they end up like not playing together at 5-on-5, I think you basically have to hope for that power play to go off for Miller to be in that 90 point range, in my opinion. All right, so Eichel into Werenski.
Yeah, I was gonna say it if you weren't.
You're just gonna ignore. You're gonna be like, yeah, I don't agree with you, Chris, but Eichel into Werenski. Werenski over Quinn Hughes. Talk me through that one.
Yeah, I think there's some different arguments to be made here. I am a little bit worried about Vancouver just in general. Like, you look up and down that forward group, it's not exciting, right? You hope that Pettersson is back to doing Pettersson things, but realistically, who else on that team is scoring 60 points this year? Maybe Brock Besser gets back to 60 points this year. Maybe Jake DeBrusk takes a step this year. Maybe Philip Hedl stays healthy for the first time in his career for a full year and plays on top power play and gets there. But like, the offense has to come through Quinn Hughes, and he can do it. Don't get me wrong, but he is gonna have to do all of it once again. And to sustain that year after year after year is a really difficult ask of any player, even the elite players. So I think there's some risk with Quinn Hughes that people are maybe not, really talking about just because he's been elite for so long. And yeah, Werenski obviously has a huge breakout last year. He got a bunch of extra minutes, like basically played the most minutes in the league, and he upped his shot volume as well. I do think that shot volume comes down a little bit this year, but it's still going to be elite. Like, what was he, third amongst all players, not just defensemen, in shots on goal last year?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's still
300 shots
pretty
was ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, and he does well in the blocks as well. He is similar to Quinn Hughes. He is kind of the engine of that Columbus offense, both at even strength and on the power play. So I think, like, as a baseline projection, I think Zach Werenski can still score at least 70 points, assuming health, for an 82 game season. And then if he can do even a portion of what he did last year, like, realistically, Columbus had a great year, but it was like pieces of great years from different players. Like, Monahan had that really hot start, then he gets injured, then Fantilli takes over and he gets really hot. A lot of players were not consistent throughout the year. Only really Werenski was consistent throughout the year. And so I think if the young players there in Columbus actually get a little bit more consistent, you could actually see a better baseline of scoring from the team this year. And that could help kind of, mitigate the impact of what's probably a little bit of regression coming from Werenski this year.
Yeah, I definitely could see, like, just from an overall point total, if Werenski has a similar season with the shot volume, that he could potentially outproduce Quinn Hughes just from like a fantasy points perspective. But in my opinion, I think that when you have a guy like Quinn Hughes who is consistently over a point a game and well over a point a game and can dip into, like back-to-back years where he scored 17 and 16 goals, like, I don't think 20 is out of the question for him. I think he could easily hit 95 points like we saw the year before where he was at 92. And his shot volume is pretty decent now, enough to where, it's probably almost in an 82 game year, like 100 shots less than Werenski's. And obviously you're not getting that block total out of him. But if he's scoring at the same rate in terms of the goal total, the power play points are, I'll call them similar. And then he's getting an extra potentially 20 points than Werenski does. I think just there's still some upside that we haven't seen from Quinn, and he's probably safer just given the fact that he's less of an injury risk, I'll call it, than Werenski as well.
Yeah, I don't honestly think that's true. Like Werenski was healthier than Quinn Hughes was
Yeah,
last year.
he's been good the past 2 seasons. I'll give you that, but I'm looking a little bit more historically in that sense. And this is the first time in the past like 4 seasons that he's played under 75 games.
Yeah, I don't personally take injury narrative into account too much when I'm drafting. I think when we do that, we miss out on a lot of great seasons. You miss out on the season that Erik Karlsson had, where he scored 100 points. If you're doing stuff like that, you miss out on, like Malkin was injury prone for how many years, and then he rattles off like what was it, 3 straight 82 game seasons in his mid 30s. So like I think it's mostly in our heads that we think we can predict these injuries. I want to do a study, like an actual study at some point, and figure out how much of that is actually statistically predictable based on games missed. But I just think there's more downside to not getting a guy that you think is actually better than the next guy just because you're worried about some injury that may or may not occur in the upcoming season. Like I'd rather take him being good while he's on my team and then figure it out if he does get injured. I just lean in that direction pretty consistently.
Yeah, I think that's where, at least between the two of us, and I've seen it a couple times with, because I love, one of my favorite things about doing the Creator League is going back and reacting to people's reactions on picks. And we've talked about this like earlier in the year when we kind of sat down for the first time, and you kind of like ripped a couple of my picks. I don't think you can predict injuries. I don't think that's the right way to go about it. But I do think that there are some players that are more, I'll call it like prone to injuries, for lack of a better term, than others. And Malkin's a great example. Like, yeah, he's rattled off 3 seasons in a row with like 82 point or 80 around like that 80 game mark, which is great. But at the same time, I'm like the circumstance. It's kind of like the Kaprizov and Jack Hughes conversation. The circumstance of the fact that if they're out for the second half of your season and they miss fantasy playoffs, like you're screwed at that point. Like you're significantly in a spot to where you've handcuffed yourself and taken a risk on a player that hasn't paid off, and now you're kind of like paying for it. God, you're flying off the board here. You went Nietzsche into Kempe. Absolutely just ripped me for taking Tim Stützle in the 3rd round last time and being like, yeah, I'd rather go 2 players before him, not just one. Both right wing. I'm seeing a bit of a trend in this draft, and tell me if you're on the same page here, where the left wing feels more scarce than right wing this year.
Yeah, it definitely does. I think that's accurate. The left wing does feel more scarce this year, but I have also noticed that like there's a lot of sleepers that play left wing that I really like. So I do actually kind of like how that ends up just opening me up to take some of my favorite sleeper picks, like a Gauthier that I took in the last draft. There's some others. So yeah, I think that yes, it's true, but also for me specifically with some of the players that I'm targeting in later rounds, I'm kind of okay with letting them go by and just kind of taking best player available when I feel that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and I think I'm actually gonna be able to get some pretty good value here at wing, looking at who's available. I think I probably prefer Wyatt. I think that's where I'm going. I'm going to skip out on Matthew Tkachuk this time. There's still also really good value at goalie here, but I think I like Wyatt the most. So I feel like when I'm at the 5 spot, when I draft Makar, I can kind of just punt defenseman for like 4 rounds and not really have to worry about it because I'm so far ahead in that regard. But just especially like in our FPPL drafts, like this is pretty typical to see a lot of the top end defensemen gone by round 5. Like there was a run last year where that you're seeing pretty similar to here in the second round, where it's like Werenski, Hughes, Bouchard, Dahlin, even like sometimes Yossi, all gone within the first like 2 rounds, and then you're scrambling to try and find defensemen, and it's a pretty common thing that happens in FPPL drafts. And I was definitely like a victim to it last year in my one FPPL league, where I felt almost obligated to take Bouchard at the turn last year. And I think it was, I can't remember if I had Jack Hughes or if it was, no, because Rantanen went earlier. It might have been Jack Hughes that I got into Bouchard, and then Hughes got injured, and then Bouchard obviously was fine, but not like otherworldly, I would say, to the point where it really like screwed me over not getting another elite forward with my second pick in the draft.
Yeah, that is a question where to take that swing. Yeah, I mentioned it in the last draft. Like, it does feel like there's a spot in the middle of drafts where there's only a few guys that I do like the upside enough to take in kind of the middle rounds at defense, and it feels like a lot of other guys are just getting chased up
Yeah.
into those rounds just because people feel like, oh, I got to get a defenseman here.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't want to be in that spot a whole lot. I took Chikrin here. I don't know if I'll take him at the spot in my actual drafts, but I think he is going to get power play 1. Like, that's the power play they ran in the playoffs, right? Was Strom, Ovechkin, Wilson, and then the 2D on the back end. And I think
Yeah.
that might actually be their best unit to run both Carlson and Chikrin. And if that's the case, then then you're talking about power play 1 all year long for Chikrin. The guy is a huge goal scoring threat, one of the best goal scoring defensemen across the entire league, and he provides good numbers just kind of across the board. With that nuclear potential, if he and Ovechkin are kind of the shooters from long range, I think there's a lot of potential that could go really well. There was a stretch last year where he was the sole guy on power play when Carlson went down to injury, where he was just nuking everybody for fantasy. He was like a top 5D for like a month or 6 weeks or something like that. And then he did kind of fall off towards the back end of the year a little bit. But overall, I just think the potential is pretty high on Chikrin. So he's one guy I might swing on somewhere in this range, especially if I'm not like loving the tier of wingers that I'm looking at. Like, if it feels like a lot of them are the same, and maybe I could get one to fall back to me that I still like, that's of a similar caliber, then maybe there's a spot where I take him here. It's just hard to draft from the turn too, with defense running off the board like this too, and you got to kind of do a little bit more of the reward side of the risk reward analysis, right? You got to kind of lean on that a little bit turn, and you got to take some swings sometimes.
Yeah, especially like we've been talking about all night how difficult it is to draft from the 111 or the 112. It feels like you're in a losing situation a lot of the time, where you get the back end of a lot of tiers too. Like, even like Chikrin there, like, I don't know where you have him posted, but like, you look at the guys that went before him on the defensive side, and you've got Shea Theodore and Mikhail Sergachev, who are 2 high point producing power play 1 defensemen. And it's just like, it feels like at that turn, it gets to the point where it's just always a bit of a drop off of a tier. So you're definitely in a more difficult spot than you were in the last draft, but I don't think you've done too poorly with where you're at. Talk me through Seth Jarvis. Actually, that's a good point today, because we were talking about it just amongst the 3 of us, just in our group, the 4 of us, excuse me, about like Carolina in general, and how like there's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense now that Ehlers is there. And I'm actually like pretty high on Ehlers, just because of his rates are so good, and the fact that he just, for whatever reason, is not playing over 16 minutes a night is absolutely absurd to me, even though he did get power play 1 time for the first time last year in Winnipeg. I think he's somebody that could absolutely pop off this year if he even jumps to around that 18-minute mark and it gets like a slight bump, where I'm just seeing so many years where he's like below 16 minutes. Like, I think that's a little bit ridiculous in my opinion.
I have Ehlers for more points overall, lateral, better projection overall, but the triple eligibility on Jarvis is so nice too. I think he's the safer guy there in Carolina. That Brendan Moore loves this guy. He's Like, I haven't projected over 19 minutes, and that's something you can't really say about a lot of Carolina players. It's basically just him and Aho that Brind'Amour loves this much. I'm for like 71 points. That's only with 20 power play points. So again, if that power play really pops off and Jarvis is a part of that, then you could see some upside from that power play number. I have him for 221 shots, 109 hits. Like, he's an underrated hitter. He's not a big dude,
Yeah.
but he does throw the body a bit. So you just get like such a great floor with Seth Jarvis, which I think is where you want to start from. I think he is like a favorite of the coaching staff, and so he is going to get all the best opportunity throughout the course of the season. And then hopefully the addition of Ehlers just kind of supercharges him even a little bit more than what I've got him projected for at a baseline here. And I think that's a real possibility for Seth Jarvis this year. I do think him and Ehlers are both really good options in the same round. If I had gone a forward instead of Chikrin, I probably would have taken Ehlers where I took Chikrin there.
Interesting. Ehlers over Timo Meyer and Dylan Guenther. Yeah, like I agree. It's a spot where it's kind of weird because of the fact that he's played under 16 minutes so consistently up until this point. You actually like don't know how much of an increase he's going to get. How like can he actually? Because I find that there's times where guys will have really good rates in like the 15, 16 minute mark, and then they jump to like that 17, 18 minute mark, and you don't see a lot of change in terms of their overall production. Like I think Alexi Lafreniere is a great example of that. The year last year where they finally played him in the top six, it wasn't necessarily a great year for him, even though he was given a better role in the offense. So sometimes like that stuff does happen, and I think Ehlers is talented enough to be able to actually capitalize on those extra minutes, and especially from like he's definitely more offensive oriented than say like a Seth Jarvis, who I think is kind of approaching that elite two-way role in the National Hockey League in general. Like I so excited to kind of like see his growth and progression, and because he's so good defensively, that I do think that there is a ton of upside available for Ehlers. So you go Hischier and Marchenko. I was looking at in my pick I got to Matej Mitchkov actually, which I was pretty happy about in the 5th round there. I was looking at guys like Kyrou. I was looking at Matthew Nyes, Kevin Fiala, and Marchenko were the other two that I was looking at. I wanted to take a winger still, but I think Marchenko's just going a little bit too late in drafts for me right now. Like anywhere, even in like that round 6 range. Like he could easily score 35 goals.
Yeah, I love Marchenko. He's pretty awesome to watch. Electrifying player, one of the best in the league off the rush. Just breaks down defenses so well when he attacks with speed. I think he is probably maybe Werenski's the number 1 reason, but maybe Marchenko's the number 2 reason why Sean Monahan had the season that he had. So I love Marchenko, especially if he's going to fall this far. I think that's not really respecting his potential upside with another year under his belt. And yeah, really solid floor. I don't see anyone coming for his line 1, power play 1 status. So that's, again, just kind of banking on guys I think will provide me something. I didn't want to take another right wing there. I was going to take Fiala again just to get another left winger going. But Fiala went off for 1 pick before me, so I had to adapt on the fly. And yeah, taking Nico Hischier there, I think Hischier's being disrespected a little bit. If you look at, if you just plug projections in with just about any point system, really, Nico Hischier comes out way ahead of a lot of guys that are ahead of him in the draft. So I just love Nico Hischier where he's going in drafts. I know he's center only. If you can fade centers enough to where you feel comfortable taking him as maybe your second center or even your first center, if you really fade centers early on, I just love Nico Hischier and the value he's providing here in the 8th.
Yeah, I don't know if you're getting it on your end, but your mic does seem to be cutting out. So maybe try unplugging and plugging back in, or if you've had that issue before, but you're just getting some weird kind of cuts. It is my pick though, and I'm pretty sure I do want to go. Did he just go actually? Did somebody take him? No. I'm so incredibly high on Adam Fantilli this year that I'm just finding myself drafting him in this range in general, like anywhere beyond round 7 is kind of where I look to get him. I think he could just absolutely be a league winner outright. Just the fact that we see him score 30 goals in that basically second half of the season where he kind of was actually getting line 1 minutes. He feels like an absolute slam dunk elite upside pick for me this year. So that's I'm finding myself reaching for him specifically in drafts. I don't know if you're actively looking for him or if he's just somebody that kind of falls to you that you're really happy to take. But at least in this spot, I'm very happy to take him in like that because I think he could easily have 35 goals.
Yeah, I think you definitely can. I think it's a question of Sean Monahan is going to be the 1C again all year, or is Fantilli going to take that next step this year? So depends how much you believe that, but definitely I love taking the swing on upside guys, especially as we get later in these drafts. So I like Adam Fantilli. I don't know if I'm taking him in the 8th necessarily. I'm probably trying to hang on and grab him a little bit later than that, but I love the player. I love the upside potential. How's the mic now? Is it better?
All good. You're crystal clear, my friends.
I think it's Discord. Discord doesn't like
Probably.
it sometimes when I have too many things open, so I closed a bunch of stuff.
I feel like I should take a defenseman here, and I think I'm going to go a little bit safe. I'm going to grab Cam Fowler, who's somebody that we really like. I'm very happy with all 3 of my Ds so far. I have Makar in the first round, ended up getting Seth Jones kind of towards the end of the 6th round there, and then Cam Fowler, all guys that are on our must draft defenseman video. All guys that are slotting into power play 1 spots. Makar is obviously solidified there, but looks like Seth Jones will be in that power play 1 spot in Florida, and Cam Fowler should slot into that St. Louis power play, which is relatively, I believe they were pretty good last year. Once he kind of came to the fold.
Yeah, they're definitely much better once he got there and once they kind of figured out their units, once Holloway was cooking. Yeah, the second part, that part where they were on that, like, what was it, a 13-game win streak?
It was a heater, yeah.
Yeah, that was crazy. But he was definitely a big part of that. I like that. The issue with Fowler, and I really want to like him a lot more this year, but like he doesn't shoot and he doesn't hit at all. He barely blocks. Like it's just in most formats, it's just a little bit hard to stomach taking that kind of production profile. So that's the part that I'm still finding it hard to get in on. But later on, if you do have a big weight for power play points, I do think he is going to be that power play guy. So that part is nice. That part feels pretty solid to me. But yeah, I don't know if you have considered like it's just the baseline, right? Like we talk about some of these guys having such a good baseline with the peripheral stats. Even a guy like Fantilli has that, right? Like he's a hitter, he's a shooter, got those things in his corner, even if the rest doesn't pan out the way that we want it to, at least early in the season. But like if Fowler starts the season on a cold streak, you're probably just dropping him.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a recency bias pick, but I think what I like most about Fowler, just given the fact that like his second half was very good when he slotted into that top role. Like he had 23 points in his last 29 games. You're right though; it's not a crazy peripheral floor by any means, but he's pretty much a lock for 40 every single season. And now that he's kind of been solidified as that power play 1 defenseman in St. Louis, I think he does have a little bit more upside than some of the guys in this range. Like I was considering Erik Karlsson there as well. I think it's also possible that he gets traded again this year. I know there's been some rumors that he is going to, or is Detroit's interested in him. But look at the guys in this range. Like Ekblad's not a power play 1D. Vince Dunn isn't like a power play 1 defenseman. Luke Hughes still, as high as we both are on him, is a bit of a question mark going into next year. Nikishin isn't getting any power play time. Noah Dobson's not a power play 1D. That's like even looking into next round. So I think in the range in his ADP is a really good pick, which is why we like him so much. But yeah, over the past like 3 seasons, like 48 points in 82 games, 39 points in 81, and then last year 40 and 68 with an elite second half where he was the power play 1D. So I think that's kind of the reason why we're higher on him, even though the peripherals don't really stand out.
Yeah, makes sense to me. I like this range, man. It's always a fun range where, yeah, you get into the 10th round and it's Hintz, it's Barzal, it's Peterka, just guys with tons of potential, right? Like you can really tell yourself a story where things work out for them this year. I think Barzella is like the most actual talent of that group, but is in the worst situation. So like, how do you weigh
Yeah.
one versus the other? How would like add Logan Cooley to that group, right? Like, how would you kind of rank through those guys? Because I think you could tell yourself a story about any of them.
Are we including like the Jeeks, the Trocheks? Hints I'm a little bit reserved about this year. I know people really like him. It's more of a peripheral situation with him, and if he skates along like in between J Rob and Random, like I'm obviously a lot higher on than I normally am. Barzell's nice because he's now center right wing. Cooley I think has the most upside, but again, it's kind of dependent on where he plays. Like I think in my mind,
Yeah.
I just envision him sandwiched between Clayton Keller and Dylan Gunther, and at that point he goes absolutely nuclear, and he's a league winner given his ADP. But I think out of everybody in this range for like this kind of like mid-tier centerman, like Sam Bennett's obviously a fan favorite just because the peripherals with him are insane. You throw Jeek into that conversation, but now I'm a little bit hesitant about Jeek given the fact that it looks like Marco Rossi is going to be skating on line one, which I'm honestly not surprised about after the season that he had. It just doesn't make sense. The narrative that I heard over the course of the summer where they were looking at trading him because they didn't trust him in the playoffs, even though he's like, I think it's literally the reason is because of his height. But I'm actually like, just because there's so many options, like I'm not really looking for a forward in this range. If I had to pick one, I think I like Cooley. Barzell scares me a little bit because he is in New York, and I don't think there's a ton of upside on a team like that. I know some people are getting excited about some like one-off name guys like Bo Horvat's going late in drafts, and he typically scores 30 in his sleep every year. But I'm not getting to a lot of Islanders this year. So I think I like Cooley, I like Rupe, even like a Trocheck Jeek I would consider, but I'm very much like at this range. I'm like, if you're talking about anything beyond round 9, I try to tend to skew a little bit more upside, and at that point, I'm looking at a Logan Cooley, just simply because of the fact is like you pick this guy in round 10, and he could just outright win you the league if he plays like alongside Keller and Genther at pretty much 5-on-5 and power play 1 all throughout the season, and he puts up 80 points, because I do think the talent is there for him to do that. It's just, is the opportunity gonna live there? And even not like in a top 6 role, I still think it's a similar point total to what you're seeing around Trocheck, Jeek, Rupe, like 65, 70 points. It's just more so like certain guys are much better peripheral wise, certain guys are much better upside, and then Barzell is just kind of in that same range. I guess, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a tough decision. There's almost too many options.
Yeah, there's a lot of options there. I'm gonna take a ride with Steven Stamkos here. Maybe he's got to bounce back. I don't really know, but it feels like last year was like the absolute worst case scenario,
Yeah.
and it should get better. Whether it will or not is definitely up for debate, but it feels like it should get better. So I'll take that swing here. I don't know what else I'm gonna do. There's a lot of guys I still have some love for. I still got love for Jared McCann. I don't know
Oh
if Lane
God.
Lambert there is gonna change things up too much. Like the personnel does kind of dictate the way that they've distributed ice time over the past number of years. But if Lane Lambert does kind of identify that Jared McCann is the one guy who should not come off the ice on the power play and should just stay out there and take shots because he is that much of a better shooter than anybody else they've got on that team, then I mean, there's at least a chance. And I think Jared McCann still has, that 30, 35 goal upside. And I think we'll know pretty soon, pretty early on in the season, whether or not they're going to be running a little bit more of a condensed a top 6 power play 1 kind of style, or if they're going to just go back to the same old, same old. I just like struggle to see, like, we've had 2 coaches in a row now in Seattle who have done the same thing, and it has not worked out for either of them. And so is Lane Lambert really gonna walk in here and be like, you know what, I think I'll try I think I'll try the exact same thing as these guys did. And then, there is actually the piece to Lane Lambert where he went into New York to the Islanders, and it was really underrated what he did with them. Like, he actually turned them into one of the better offensive like in terms of the just like the Corsi 4 and the shots on goal and stuff, like they actually turned that whole thing completely 180 from where it was the previous year. And so I think there's a chance at least that Lane Lambert has a pretty positive impact on Seattle's overall offense generation. Theoretically, Jared McCann is the guy who benefits the most from that. I've just talked for 4 minutes about Jared McCann save me.
Yeah, I think I don't really have 4 minutes of time to talk about Jared McCann. If even given that, I think I could. I'm not drafting anybody from Seattle this year. Like outside of at least from the forwards ends, like I think you could get good value out of Joey Decord late in drafts from a goaltender perspective. I think there's a reason that you would want to draft like a Vince Dunn or a Brandon Montour. But I don't trust that forward group until they show me that I can trust them at that point. And I think if there is somebody that I would draft, it would be McCann. I think that it's kind of just the circumstance of they're all pretty much the same player and there's just 9 of them. Like you could say like, oh, Jaden Schwartz could score 25 goals next year, and I would believe you. I'd be like, yes, that's possible. But until we get a better understanding of what their ice time allocation looks like, I'm staying away from Seattle.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to be like totally burned if you stay all the way away from Seattle this year. That seems like a fairly safe bet to make.
Yeah, like I think in that range, like I'm still aligned with kind of like the vision that you're going with, but I think I'm still hunting for some upside picks here. Because even though like there are some really solid, safe players available still, this is where you win your drafts, right? Like if you were to get Zach Werenski in anywhere in like the 9 to 11 range last year, like you win your draft because of that. So I'm still hunting for upside. I'm still trying to snag some potential like league winners in this range. And then what I find a lot of the time is that like in my last 4 picks, I'm probably swapping these guys out for guys on waiver wire through the course of the season either way. So I think like I just don't tend to try and go with the boring 40 to 45 point players in the latter half of my draft. But that's just me, obviously, whatever works for you. But I'm curious, like, but McCann. Well, it's not like you haven't found success from it, right? And I think again, it's a differing of opinion. But like, if I'm looking between like a McCann, a Marchessault, and I'm seeing like Brian Rust there, like I'm more inclined to go in the range of give me Owen Tippett, give me Will Smith, give me like I went with Cousins here. Like I can take a centerman because I only have one. Like I think there's a lot more direction you can go in terms of like even a goalie. Like I know you still haven't taken a goalie, but I think at this range, like Logan Thompson, Stolarz, Markstrom is gonna get you more value than getting another 45 point player. McCann's probably not a 45 point player. That's a little low. That's probably a little low. At least that's just
last year.
That's just my fault. Last year, there's no way he got 60. I'm gonna say below 60, above. I'm gonna say 50 to 55.
61. There it is.
Okay. Well, you could have just lied, Nate. You know what? You didn't have to do me like that. No, I just like that. Just goes to show you how little I've looked at Seattle this year. But like, I mean, like now looking at him historically, he is 28, so he's not like I always assume like this guy's like 32 years old. All of the Seattle players are the same. They all scored 20 to 25 goals. Yeah. But he's pretty much like 2 years removed from a 40 goal year. So I can understand why he projects well. I'll say that.
Somebody's got to score some goals, right? That's how it works.
You would think, and especially if there's a circumstance of that team actually being more top 6 heavy, and they go like in a little bit of a different direction, and let's say like Berkeley Catton makes the team at a camp, like then I get a little excited, you know. Mm-hmm. But just looking at their roster, I'm not excited about anything, really.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to get excited. There's a couple teams like that. Boston's another one. like Pasternak has whatever it is, tendonitis, and so he wasn't skating. And the Bruins lines were like,
Dude, I
I was
saw
like,
that.
oh no.
Yeah, like
I tweeted out, oh no, the Bruins are gonna get McKenna, aren't they?
the which would honestly be pretty unreal, and just seeing McKenna play with Pasternak at
Yeah,
all
that'd be sick.
situations pretty much. There was an idea that creeped into my brain at one point that was thinking Elias Lindholm could have a bounce back off of a bounce back season, but that quickly went away. So not quite back on him this year. But
I mean, stranger things have happened, but it's not a player that I'm like lining up to draft.
yeah, anybody? I think I want to take a shot with Marco Rossi. Well, he is center, and I do have three centers at this point, technically. So I'll go Schaefer, actually. I think just hearing about some of the NHL guys talk about him in camp, being like, this guy's going to be one of the best defensemen in the National Hockey League, does excite me a little bit, especially when it's your, pretty much one of your last picks in your draft. Like, if this guy ends up playing power play one in New York, like, I think, again, that's kind of a slam dunk pick at that point. And I think always a big believer in talent. And the fact that he went first overall just shows that he could potentially be that defenseman. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he sticks with the team the whole year. Like, I genuinely, just the sentiment of hearing things from players and coaches and interviews that have been like stated and talked about him, like, the sentiment does seem to be that he could genuinely be elite right out of the gate.
That'd be pretty sick. I really don't know what to make of him. Like, he played so
Yeah.
few games last year. It's so hard to understand what he might be immediately this year. And yeah, we talked about the Islanders not being excited about the Islanders in general too, right? Like, who's he gonna bounce pucks in off of? He's gonna have to find somebody down there. Maybe him and Barzal and Horvat can be at least a trio of NHL caliber talents, and they can figure the rest out. But yeah, I think the player will be great at some point. I just don't know if it's the right move to thrust him into that tire fire of a team right now.
I can't wait to just completely overreact and take him in some drafts, and then be like 8 games in, like, this guy's the future. He's power play one. He's like a league winner, and then they send him back on game 9.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think of Chris Kreider this season?
I kind of like Chris Kreider, especially like, yeah, 16th round. Like, you're just paying to find out, right?
Yeah,
I think he probably is power play one. They're playing him with like the first line that they ran out there was Carlson and Terry. If that sticks for a chunk of the year, like, that's prime spot for him. I think both of those players can hang on to the puck. Kreider can do what he does best and just go straight to the front of the net and stick his ass in front of the goalie's face and deflect some pucks past him. So I think it could work. Like, I do think the big question is, like, how healthy is he really? Like, was last year a one-off, or is he just kind of getting old and pretty beat up at this point and he's slowing down a lot? So that is still a pretty big question. But if he is truly fully healthy, like, I do think he could theoretically score 30 goals if he's sticking on a top power play and, kind of a top line with Terry and Carlson.
yeah, I think it's quite possible that he's not done yet, and him getting traded out of New York might have just pissed him off, and maybe he scores 30 goals, and we know he's got a good shot and hit combo, and is probably a power play one guy, to your point. All right, do you want to take a look at some of the teams and give your thoughts here, Nate? Like, I kind of went over the last one, so feel free to pick and choose. Doesn't necessarily have to be mine. If you notice anything crazy off the board that you agree or disagree with, or that you're happy about with your team, we can start with your team, and then just feel free to chime in.
Yeah. I'm okay with this team. I Yahoo is tough if you are just going with no utility spots and you gotta think about all this positional eligibility. I did really kind of focus that down a lot more in this draft. So went with Jarvis for the try eligibility. I went with Stamkos later on for the try eligibility. I kind of forced myself into that by taking Natchez and Kempe back to back as right wing only. So I kind of did it to myself as well. I think this team probably does hinge on the defensemen kind of doing what we hope they can do, but are definitely not assured of doing this year. Like Werenski, Chikrin, Hughes, that's a lot of upside, but also some downside, obviously, for each of those players. And then Devon Taves as the fourth is just, he's probably a fourth defenseman for fantasy in every format this year, and just set and forget him for most of the year. And every once in a while, you'll be like, oh man, he scored 2 goals this week. That's great. And then every once in a while, you'll be like, oh, he hasn't scored a point in 2 weeks. Should I actually drop him? And then you look at the course over the course of the season, he's like the 36th best defenseman in your settings. And you're like, ah, he was pretty good on the whole. So I feel like Taves rounds that out a little bit. Grab 2 goalies at the end. That's what I normally do. Just kind of agnostic to who I get later on. Toffoli I kind of like as a later shot too. I think he probably plays with Celebrini and Smith a fair bit. Even strength on the power play has consistently demonstrated that he can score goals. And so I think that that's a decent spot to get a left wing, right wing guy that late. Yeah, I felt this draft maybe a little bit better than the last draft from kind of the mid rounds onward. I was able to take some value as it fell to me the way I see it. So I feel a little bit better about this one overall. I do see some other 0G drafts in here, so I'm too.
Yeah, it's definitely it felt, I'll say, easier picking at the 5 spot than it did the 11 and the 12. Shocker. I'm quite happy with this draft overall. I think I take the same approach that I normally do if I pick at the 5 spot with Makar. Went safe across my forwards for the first 4 picks, like Reinhardt, Point. Can't get much safer than those guys. Both those guys should score 40 goals. Caulfield then gets me some goal upside and some really good shot volume into Wyatt, who I think is another good upside pick there. I was considering Bedard at that spot, but I do think that Wyatt is just in a better position with the fact that he could play with Rantanen than some of the other options that I was looking at. I decided to elect to not go Matthew Tkachuk, and I probably would have, if he was there at me at round 6, I'm probably taking him. But Seth Jones, again, is my second D off the board. I get some players that I think have a lot of upside in round 7 and 8 with Mitchkov, Fantilli, Cam Fowler. We talked about at length. Take my first defenseman at the 10 spot in Darcy Kemper, a guy who should play a ton, was really good in LA last year. We'll see how they do. There was a bit of a turnover with that team, so I am a little bit hesitant. I think if I were to go back and change that, I probably would want Aiden Hill over Kemper, just given the fact that Vegas should be in contention for the President's Trophy going into next year. So I think that would be the only swap that I would make in that regard. Byfield, I actually think a lot of people are sleeping on him this year. I know that he's kind of been more of a floor pick at this point, but I think sooner than later they got to give this guy the keys to the castle in that line 1 spot. And if he ends up being on a line with Fiala and Kempe, then you're absolutely laughing at that point. And he has the talent to do it. I just think that it's a matter of if, not when, or it's a matter of when, not if. Words are hard. I get to Parekh, which I was thrilled at in round 12, especially with guys going like Mikey went Colton Parayko, Nikishin, Buiam. I'd probably take over Parekh still, but I'm thrilled to get again him with my 3rd D spot. And then Dylan Cousins is somebody that I'm excited for. I think just the shot and hit mix alone makes him worth his ADP, and to get him in like round 13, like he was pretty good at the second half in Ottawa and should see a top 6 role in power play 1 even, depending on the way that mix and matches. I know they did experiment with him at power play 1 at some points last season. Jeremy Swayman, I know Boston looks bad on paper, but should play a ton. And I don't think he individually will be as bad as he did last year. And then getting another high upside player in Schaefer potentially. If he sticks, great. He's probably the power play 1D. Even if he's not, then we get to kind of get a look at him. And it's, again, like in this range, I'm like either dropping him and replacing him for more of a floor guy, or he lands on power play 1, and I'm thrilled with that pick in the 15th round. And then Kreider was for the fun of it. I was looking at some other options there, but I think, it was just somebody that I was like, let's have a discussion about this guy. Overall thoughts on my team? Anything really that you would change in the draft here?
No, not too much. I like the draft a lot. I love Seth Jones in the sixth. Like that is one guy in that kind of mid range that I am pretty into. I think he's pretty solidly set up there, good peripherals, good floor, and then yeah, it could go really well for him this year. You could get like the first 60-point season out of Seth Jones in a perfect scenario for Florida this year, and then he's worth probably, like a fourth round pick actually instead of a sixth. Caulfield, I'm finding my projection on him is placing him a little bit further back. Like the guys that went in that fifth round range around your pick, the Johnson, Celebrini, Barkov, I would have over him, even considering the center only. I think I really like the player, and I think there's potential that he could pop off in the right situation. It was just kind of a weird year last year where, like, yeah, it seemed like he really changed his play style. He changed like his shot selection a lot, and it a lot changed for the player. And I'm not really sure what to make of that going forward, and if that's a bad thing for him moving forward. And so, like, just that uncertainty has me off him a little bit, especially this high when I am trying to be a little bit more mindful of some of these players. But I love Mitchkov in the seventh. Fantilli is probably early for me in the eighth, but I love the player, so I'm never going to be mad at a non-Fantilli pick. I don't mind Kemper. I'm pretty agnostic to these goalies. I think I might actually like Allmark over Kemper and Hill. Maybe that's a hot take. I don't really know, but I think Ottawa's going to play some solid D this year. They added Jordan Spence, which should add just another puck mover on the back end that I think they really sorely lacked last year, and that should help alleviate some pressure in their own zone even a little bit more. Another year under the system there for Travis Green. I think Allmark could have a really big year. So maybe that would be one minor change I'd make, but I don't think that's changing your season. I like the Byfield pick, lots of upside there. Could be the year. Everybody's been calling this breakout for years, and now it feels like everybody's finally said like it's never going to happen. So that's probably when it happens, right?
Yeah,
We know
yeah,
this.
exactly.
And then yeah, Perek, Cousins, Swayman, Schaefer. You're just grabbing guys that have upside from where you're drafting them at this point. So really don't have anything negative to say about any of that.
Awesome. Yeah. Let's give the guys in chat maybe like an extra 5-10 minutes, and I'll let you go. I know it's been over 2 hours here, but I do want to pick your brain a little bit more before I let you go at this point. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to post them the next little bit here. Nate and I will try and get to them. And then we can kind of let Nate go. He's been here for over 2 hours, so just let's be mindful of our guests here, guys. I know they're just so used to having me ramble on for 3 hours about players, and it's a luxury for them. But yeah, let's see if anybody has anything crazy in chat. Let's see here. Would you consider Genther over Forsberg in Dynasty?
Yeah, where are you at with that one? I think it's getting closer, but I think I'm still at Forsberg. We've seen the ceiling from Forsberg already. We think the ceiling exists for Genther, but we haven't seen it yet. How many years difference are there? That's another big
I
question.
don't actually think that Forsberg is that old. I want to say
Genther's
he's like
22.
Oh, he is 31. He's 30 currently. He'll be 31 this year.
Okay. Yeah, 9 years difference.
I think Genther is in a more offensive oriented environment. I think the upside is probably like with Genther, like if you're thinking, okay, like he can score 40 goals as early as next year with like around 260, 270 shots, like I think then you say yes. You're going to see growth out of Logan Cooley. You're going to see, Clayton Keller potentially play alongside both of them, which then like they could both kind of go nuclear. So I think it really depends. Like I feel like if you count hits, like then it's clearly Philip Forsberg. And I don't think he's as bad as what he showed last year. Like I think he's probably in between that 94-point season and that 76-point season where he scores around 40 goals. But the fact that he could lead you in the league in shots potentially even, like I think that's also a consideration to do. with like the year before last being 347. Like that's insane in combination with 141 hits. So I think it depends on two things. Number one, are you trying to win next year? Yes or no? And number two, do you count hits in your league? If both those answers are yes, or if one of those answers are yes, it's probably Forsberg. At least that's where I'm at. Where should Matt Tkachuk go? I think round 6, I'd be comfortable taking him. Because at that point, I feel like I have at least 3 elite forwards, or at least 3 forwards that I'm happy with in the first 4 rounds, and at least a defenseman or 2, depending on the league. And if I feel that I'm ahead in that draft at that point, then I'm fine taking Matt Tkachuk for the fact that you're getting probably a top 20 player for the second half of the season. I think that's late enough.
I think it's a pretty interesting question. I'm kind of wondering if he is just like that player that will win you your league if you can survive until he arrives, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a pretty good chance that he is, like a top 20 player from the time he arrives till the end of the season. And if he does arrive earlier rather than later, then that could be really good. But also, if you do spend a 6th round pick on him, and like it just narrows your margin so much more to spend that pick on a guy who's not even going to play. Because what happens when your 1st or 2nd round pick goes down to injury? Then now you're not just down that pick, but you're also playing from behind with the 6th round pick already as well. It just becomes progressively harder. So it is a calculated bet for sure. You have to have a lot of belief in your top guys. I think you have to have a lot of belief in their floor and their ability to stay healthy and produce for you. So that is kind of the scary part for me with Tkachuk. But also, if you can get there, there is a pretty good chance that he absolutely puts your team over the top, puts you in the playoffs, maybe wins you the playoffs as well. The other part is, like, we have seen a lot of players come back from these midseason injuries and have pretty slow starts and pretty slow seasons overall. And crazy if Kachuk was another one who just wasn't quite himself when he got back. And Florida being Florida, they say it doesn't really matter. Play your 15 minutes. Just be ready when playoffs roll around. Don't worry about the rest. Like, yeah, there's just a lot going on there for me. And yeah, I haven't pulled the trigger in the 6th anywhere yet. Maybe if it's getting more like 7th, 8th, then I'm thinking about it more seriously. But it is a really, really interesting conversation to have because it could make or break your season.
Yeah, completely agree. It's wherever you really feel comfortable with them. I think in the 6th round, it's the round where I actually like start considering it. Because of the fact at that point you're either first 5 picks like you're completely happy with, where you're like, I'm gonna win the league. It also depends on like if you had an earlier pick too, like if you have a McDavid, if you have a Draisaitl, if you have a McKinnon, or even Kucherov at that point. Like if you're picking in the first 4 rounds and you're also getting Matt Tkachuk in the 6th round, it feels like you're just so far ahead at that point. To the point where it's either like almost guaranteed you the win for your league, assuming everything else goes according to plan, or it's like the value that you're getting in the 6th round is more or less equal to what Matt Tkachuk's going to provide you. And to your point, it's like you just kind of got to survive through the first half. All right, Nate. Well, feel free to pick one more question out of the group, guys. If you have any final questions, now would be the time to ask him. I'm going to let Nate go after this. He's been more than accommodating through this 2-hour kind of live stream that we popped up on a Friday. So I'm going to let him kind of finish off his night here. So if you guys have any final questions for myself or Nate, feel free to shoot them in there, and then we'll probably call it a night at that point. So, but just wanted to take the time to appreciate you guys for chilling in the stream here. You guys are incredible. 41 likes on the channel. If you guys want to leave a like, really appreciate you guys. It really helps us push the channel. Go check out Apples and Genos and their channel. They do a lot of also long form content as well that is really valuable and really is able to like deep dive into discussion that we don't really do too much on our YouTube channel, at least in the VOD content that we provide. So if you're interested in that as well, it's always just nice to kind of have them. I have them constantly playing in the background now anytime they post a video. So go check them out for sure. But Nate, feel free to grab a question, one that interests you if that's the case. and then I'll let you go at that point.
There's a question here from Harry. What kind of year does Nyes have? I think this is a really tough one because there's a lot to really like about Matthew Nyes, and there's a lot of questions based on last year. Has a terrific year. The shooting percentage is through the roof. Marner's gone, who is kind of like the perfect player to feed a player like Matthew Nyes. You have the situation where a lot of people are looking at the profile of Matthew Nyes and saying like there's more for this player to give. You see elements of the hockey sense being there where you think he could become an even better, distributor of the puck and not just be like the classic net front guy who just like skates hard to the front of the net, stops and only does that one thing. Like you see that there is the potential at least for more of a well-rounded player who could theoretically drive some play on his own. Last year, he didn't have to, right? It was Matthews and Marner. And this year, he's probably going to have to because it's going to be him and Matthews as the 1-2. And then they're going to probably cycle some other guys through on the other side, Michelli getting the first look here in camp. So I think it's a really, really interesting conversation. Where I landed in projections is pretty similar to where he ended up last year. I do think there probably is a bit of a step for the player overall, but I don't think you can necessarily say that he's gonna like this year elevate to be like an 80-point player. I think it's maybe within the range of outcomes, but he would have to take another step a year after taking a pretty huge step, and that's a pretty unusual career development path. Where are you at with Matthew Nyes?
It's hard because I really like him as a player, and I am a Leafs fan. So like seeing him be kind of like a catalyst, especially like watching him is always like I'm a fan of him as a player. I do agree that the shooting percentage really kind of skewed that season for him. You're bang on with the fact that Marner's leaving. It kind of leaves some question marks in terms of what his ceiling really is. But the jump in minutes is also a contributing factor as well. Like if he's playing 18 minutes a night, which I'm assuming he will going into next season, like I think he's over that 50-point range. And I don't really think that you're drafting this guy for it's not like a Mitchkov, it's not a Celebrini, it's not a Bedard. He's not in, it's not even like a Fantilli, I think, in that sense. And they kind of go in the same range. So you're not really drafting this guy in hopes that he's going to become a point per game player or like an 80 plus point guy, which like if he ends up around like 70 points, like that's a crazy year out of him. But the thing I love most about him is that like he's playing a left wing position. He's going to get a ton of ice time this year. He's going to be on power play 1 full time, especially with Marner leaving. I think that's kind of like leveling out kind of the expectation as well. But the fact that he'll get you 150 shots and potentially 200 hits next year, like you're looking like Brady Light. And I think it's possible he scores 30 next year just because of it's kind of like offsetting. It's like Marner leaves, but he's playing more ice time, but he's also on power play 1 full time now. And I think it'll like he naturally grows as a player as well. I don't think he's a skill driver of a line on his own. And so I think all these things kind of even itself out. And I think he lives in like that 50 to 60 point range again next year with around 30 goals. And I think you'll more or less see what you saw out of him last year, and you should draft him according to that range, in my opinion.
That's good.
All right, guys. Well, that'll do it. Thank you again so much for chilling. Appreciate all of you for being here. Big shout out to Nate for being here. Nate, I'll let you have the floor to kind of say your goodbyes, promote whatever you want to. If there's anything cool up and coming on the Apples to Geno side, we've got content pretty much hammering out every single day from now until the end of September into camp and into the season as well. So, yeah, the floor is yours, my friend. Thank you again so much for joining us, and I'll let you kind of close things out.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is always a good time. Always good to chop it up with you guys. And we're doing the same thing you guys are. We're deep in the midst of grinding out all this content for the month of September. Obviously, the most crucial month of the year. Get everybody prepped for these drafts. The biggest undertaking we had this off season was to put together the Apples and Geno's fantasy guide. which you can get. It's our pinned link on Twitter. If you search the Apples and Junos Fantasy Guide, it'll be the first thing that comes up. You'll be able to find it if you're looking for it. But if you are interested in doing some reading, 167 pages, there is
Oh
that
my
in a
God.
guide available to you. That is something that Blake and I spent an unholy amount of time on this summer, getting that ready for everybody. So, that's the number one thing to plug. But yeah, obviously you can follow us anywhere you get a podcast, anywhere you watch a video here on YouTube. We're in all those spots. You can join us on Twitter. We retweet a ton of stuff, line changes, injury reports, stuff like that. So pretty good follow for that stuff if you're on Twitter too.
Lovely. Big shout out to Nate, guys. Thank you again for joining me, my friend. Had a great time as always. We'll look to do some future stuff in the content. We'll get Blake in here. I'm sure he's just clawing it, trying to get back in now that we've done 2 of these little streams, and he's been left out there, unfortunately. But thank you again so much for joining, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and look forward to more content coming on the Fantasy Puck channel. We'll hammer it out. We've got a couple great videos. We got a mock draft Monday happening, a couple great videos next week as